Chairman Nicholas. Mr. Chairman, you do have a quorum for purposes of per diem. Representative Almond. Present. Representative Angelos. Here. Representative Haraldson. Here. Representative Pendergraph. Here. Representative Smith. Here. Senator Driscoll. Senator Larson. Here. Senator Smith. And Co-Chairman-elect Bear.
Here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you all for having us here this morning. I'd like to start off with some introductions of who we are. I'm Dr. Ben Moritz. I'm the Executive Director of the Community College Commission. Along here on the table, Dr. Laurel Ballard is our Deputy Director and Chief Academic Officer. We also have President Brad Tyndall from CWC. He serves as President of the Presidents on our Executive Council. We also have Commissioner Greg Blickery joining us via Zoom. He texted me earlier, he was working on it, so I'm not sure if he's on yet, but he will be joining us and may have comments here and there or be able to respond to questions. And also I'd like to recognize in the audience, we have President Joe Schaefer from LCCC, and we have our Chief Technology Officer, Paris Edeburn. These are my phone a friend folks in case questions come up that they can help with. So I'll just jump right into an overview of the commission. We are the coordinating body for the community colleges, the 8 community colleges in the state of Wyoming. We are a pass-through agency for state funding, and we also provide reporting and facilitation and coordination services. So that means whenever there are projects that involve more than one of the colleges or the colleges and the university, we are there to step in to coordinate those efforts. And then we do a lot of work on the IT side as well. There is a great deal of information that the colleges and the university utilize, and there is a lot of value to be had from crunching those numbers, providing reports. Many of those reports have been requested over the many decades by this body, and we provide those for you on a regular basis. We also work on projects such as Wyoming Works, Wyoming's Tomorrow. We work with WDE on Hathaway issues, and so any of the higher education coordination space, we are there, and our very professional staff does a great job of working on that. We have also shared with you some documents. Most importantly, we have an at-a-glance document. We put this together every year, and it highlights some of the things we're most proud of across the colleges. I'd like to point out that we, again, and for many years, rank in usually the top 5 or 6 community college systems in the country. I place all that credit with the colleges. They do a great job, and most important, I believe in that, is that local control and the locally elected boards that run those colleges. By having locally elected boards and that local service area, the colleges are able to really focus on what the needs of their community are. And they do a great job. They focus on not only setting up students for transfer to the University of Wyoming, but they also do a great deal of community outreach and, most importantly, career and technical education training, workforce training. I'm wondering if Commissioner Blickery is on. I don't know if he's on there yet. He's not on there yet, okay. Well, we'll throw that to Commissioner Blickery a little bit later, but I did want to talk about some of the coordinating councils that we have as well. We have 7 councils that bring together the functional groups for each of the colleges and the commission itself. So we have an academic affairs council that has the vice presidents of academics from each of the colleges, along with our chief academic officer. We do the same for the administrative VPs, for the chief information officers, et cetera, on all of those VP level committees. Those groups meet between every 2 weeks and every month, and that's where a lot of the decision-making, the coordination, the collaboration, and identifying opportunities for efficiencies and partnerships comes up. To provide just one example of that, I'd like to turn it over briefly to Dr. Ballard. She coordinates the Academic Affairs Council, and that's one of the most important groups that we have, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Ballard.
Good morning, members of the Joint Appropriations Committee. Laurel Ballard with the Community College Commission. It's a great honor to be in front of you today. I do a lot of work with our academic affairs vice presidents in the colleges. We do a lot of coordination, not only between themselves, but also with the University of Wyoming, working on things like transition and between post-secondary institutions. They do a lot of work on new program reviews and approvals of those. So they go through and look at not just like curriculum and the quality of the program, but matching that and looking and ensuring that it aligns with industry demand and is relevant to the jobs that are needed in their local communities. They also look for a lot of opportunities to provide shared resources and shared problem solving. It's been really interesting to watch them as one talks about a need they have or they're working through in their community, in their college, and to see how the other colleges talk about how they've solved for that problem before and come up with new solutions and those kinds of things. So it's been a really amazing group to work with. And a lot of the groups that we work with are very similar in nature in how they work together.
And another important council that we have, of course, is the Executive Council, which is all of the presidents who meet about monthly. And we have the president of the presidents, the POP, with us today. So I thought I'd turn this over to Dr. Tyndall to talk a little bit more about some of that collaboration you do at the presidential level.
Thank you, Ben. Mr. Chairman, representative senators. Yes, I am the POP, the president of the presidents it's a 2-year coordinating term for which I'm not paid anything extra, but it's fun, but it keeps you busy. So a lot of you were there when I was on the panel for the WIP, and we were talking about really the rate of return. And so what we've heard so far is a little bit how we're structured. It's like who cares? And there's certain things you just have to remember. So we had some quite impressive return of investment numbers in terms of our CTE programs. We're talking over a 5-year period, around 700%. And you think, wait a second, this is too good to be true. But so I really want to talk about the reason why I think we get there. And one thing as an economist, I've looked at the numbers. I said, well, what's the multiplier they use? And their multiplier is less than 2. And every time a student leaves the state, we stop counting the rate of return on that person. So it's a valid study. I mean, there's always a little bit of wiggle room on those things. But at the end of the day, the return on investment on largely career and technical programs is quite amazing. And I think part of the reason why is partnerships and coordination. So coordination piece of this, you want to make sure, we have this thing where we talk about duplication versus replication. We need to duplicate where it makes sense. For example, a welding program at every community college makes sense. But a different type of program, you're saying, no, we don't really need that in every community. If you have enough people and your local folks come up and say that they really need it and you can meet that demand locally, it's most effective. Because at Central Wyoming College, for example, we're 85% at risk. And our average profile of a student in our college, and very typical of others, is a single mom in their 30s. They can't just pick up and go to another place. So I think we have a very efficient, I think our last rating was 3 or 4 nationally, because a very efficient system. And so we have all these councils, and we virtually already operate it as a system. We like to say small s because we have local boards and local control, which is really, really important for local autonomy and serving your needs in your community. And so how do we meet that needs? It seems very common for someone to come up and say, you know what the community colleges need to do? They need to talk to business and industry. I'm going, wait a second, you don't know anything about our world, because we do. So we're all required to have advisory committees, and we meet required twice a year. And this is because we receive some Pell money. It's not a whole lot of money. Central Wyoming College, we get around $150,000 a year. But it does push us to do the best practice of meeting with all our business and industry partners. Welding program, welding advisory committee, nursing, all the hospitals, et cetera, across our programs. And so across the community colleges, we have 500 plus business and industry partners that meet with us twice a year in groups to say, what does our curriculum need to be? So it's designed for somebody specifically. You say, what do you need? You want a lot of English, this, that, and the other? They say, we don't need that. We just a little bit. We need more social skills. They know how to do TIG welding, but not arc welding. And you're going, okay, let's dial in on this. And so when you customize your product in a very high-paying industrial sector where by and large, a lot of people just want to stay here. You don't study welding, so you can go move to, New York City, for example. So I say all this just so you kind of know how our systems are, that we do talk with business and industry. They are catered for their needs. And that's how the community college sector operates. And then when we leverage even better returns is when we coordinate. So, because people always worry about, okay, sometimes you have to duplicate, but you don't want to replicate unnecessarily. So all these structures for all our councils, and yes, the presidents meet once a month, but we email several times a week because it's easier to communicate via email than trying to schedule an empty time for 8 presidents. So that's pretty much all I really wanted to say, is that I think the return on investment for our sector, we always like to think we're part of the solution for the state. We want to be tight with our budgets, but we also want to have kind of local Wyoming jobs for our Wyoming people. And who is that? I argue that's the community college sector. So I stand for any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If we can proceed, I wanted to give you that overview so that you had a quick refresher on what we do and how we do it. And now, we're all here to talk about the supplemental budget. So we have 4 requests in front of you. We thought we would go over each of those requests, give you some background on it, and then be open for questions and discussions. I'm sure you have a lot. Okay. We have, like I said, 4 requests. The 4th of those is related to Wyoming Public Television, and Director Kale is here. She's going to be speaking with you, I think, at 9 o'clock. So I won't go into a lot of detail on that one. Just briefly, that one is a request to increase the spending authority to keep up with the value of the endowment. The endowment has gone up. The proceeds from that have therefore gone up. We need to make sure the spending authority goes up so we're not doing B11s every time that goes up. Hope I didn't steal all of her thunder. I think she's going to tell you a lot more about all the great work that they do. But that's a quick overview. Our first request was the College Administrative Computing System, or the CACS. Not a great acronym, but that's what it is. And I wanted to give you a quick timeline on why we're here at the supplemental, why we included this in the first place. 2 years ago, we brought forward a request for a new or renewed computing system across the colleges. We are required in statute to provide a computing system for the colleges. Now, we are the contracting entity for that. It is our role to secure the contract but the administration and operation of those computing systems, the individual instances, takes place at the colleges. So again, we are a facilitator and we are coordinating that, but it is our statutory requirement to ensure that they have that system and that we either renew a contract or we go up for an RFP for bid. Now, back in 2022, we were ready to go to issue an RFP, and there were some questions and some discussions that took place with ETS. And those discussions went on over some amount of time, and we got to the point where in conversations with the governor's office and ETS, it was decided maybe we don't have enough time to do that RFP at this point. So we went to A&I and said, we would like a bid waiver so that we can renew that contract. They said, well, it's been a while. You really should go up to RFP. The last time we had done a competitive bid was 2009. But we understand you're kind of up against you've got your back against the wall here. So they gave us a bid exemption authorization, a BEA. But in that BEA, they said, you will go up for RFP after this one. So that contract took place. It was a renewal with the company Lucian, and it expires in 2028. And you might think 2028 is a long time from now.
So Ben, how much, that new contract that you entered into that expires in 2028?
Correct.
What did that cost?
I'm going to give you a ballpark. I think it was about 12 million. But I will phone a friend. Actually, can I?
Yeah, they'll probably pay attention, so.
Oh, I was right. Hey, what do you know? It was about 12 million for that period of time.
Go ahead.
And Ben, as I read through your narrative, and then I went back and looked on our budget request, I had a little trouble connecting the dots. And so this extension here, was that in the 2022 session where we extended that maintenance agreement?
That is correct.
Okay.
And it extended it from 2023 to 2028, a 5-year extension.
But the request came in '22, because in 2023, there was no request.
That is correct.
Okay.
Yes. And so after that point, last year in 2023, we pursued the RFP again, working with the governor's office. It was decided we should probably put this off until the supplemental, until this year. So we acted upon that. We put it together in the supplemental budget. The way we put our budget together is very transparent. We start in June. At the June commission meeting, we put together a draft and we say, this is what we're thinking. We get feedback from the colleges. We get feedback from everybody. It's a public meeting. We work on that over until August. Every August, we have a special meeting just devoted to finalizing that budget request, whether it be for the budgetary session or the supplemental. So at the August meeting, we then confirm this current request. And this is based, the amount that we have in front of you is based on an estimate of what kind of a top line amount would cost if we went to RFP. And that accounts for multiple possible outcomes. So if we end up going with the same vendor and the same vendor can offer the same general product, then it would be much less than that. If the RFP comes back and we decide that the best value and best product is a new, different vendor, then the price goes up, not necessarily because the subscription goes up all that much, but because the implementation of a new computing system across 8 colleges and an agency is extensive, both in time, human resources, and money. So we figured this would take 2 to 3 years to completely replace a new system, which is again why we wanted to put this up in front of you now ahead of that 2028 deadline of when the current contract expires. So this $48 million is an estimate of what it might cost if we ended up going with the current vendor and that was decided to be the best outcome. It would be less than that. So that's why that number is there. And that also is why we brought this in the supplemental. It was kind of a timing thing, and through discussions with the governor's office from last year, it was decided to move it down to this year. So I wanted to give you that context. And perhaps at this point it might be good, because this is a big request, obviously. If you have any questions, or I could also go on and review the other 2 items.
So we authorized $408,000 for a consultant to help you refine that.
Yes.
Where's all of that? What have they provided for you, and have we seen that information?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, we contracted with CampusWorks, And they are working on that now, and we do have preliminary estimates from them. We ask them to come in. They are experts in the field. They work with states all over to kind of coordinate those implementations of new computing systems, because it's a heavy lift. So they came in, they have given us some preliminary information. I just received that yesterday, and their estimate, if we were to go with a new vendor, is now about $53 million. Prices go up every year, which is another reason why we had wanted to do this, lock this in earlier. But their estimate is $53 million if we went with a new vendor, and that would be for that 5-year cycle, including implementation. The bulk of that, well, over half of that, regardless of the vendor that we chose, would be implementation costs. It would be for hiring additional staff to help do this. It would be for all of those efforts. So that's where we have found from them. They have not given us an estimate on what it would cost yet to go with the existing vendor. One of the questions that we have there, the existing vendor, since we've worked with them so long, is an on-premise service. That means that it's not in the cloud, it is located on servers on premise. Any new vendor that we worked with, they're really only doing things in the cloud. There's a lot of advantages to it. There's some efficiencies, there's some security advantages. And so for a while, we were not sure if Ellucian, our current vendor, would be able to provide in continuation of their on-premise services. If they required us to go to the cloud because they no longer offered the on-premise service, it too would be a brand new implementation, because going from on-premise to the cloud is essentially the same as if you went with an entirely new vendor. So these are some of the things that we are working out over time. We have now learned that it is very likely, I can't say positive until we get a bid on an RFP, but it is very likely that Ellucian will be able to extend its services on-premise, and so we could probably do that. But this is all dependent on the RFP process, and it's imperative that that be an objective process and that we not make any foregone conclusions about how that would turn out. But this is just to provide all of you up-to-the-minute information based on CampusWorks research that you appropriated the funds for last year.
Any questions regarding this? So, the Appropriations Committee over the course of years has been battling these large computer system processes. I mean, some of them range from $50 to $120 million. If you talk about Department of Family Services, Workforce Services products, and now this product. And it's hard for us to understand or to justify these kind of dollars for a computer system. And if you break it down per student per college, it's an incredibly expensive thing. And so what I'm trying to suggest is, number one, we're telegraphing how much money you're going to need to pay for this thing, and so the computer companies that you're going to go out and bid know how much money you're going to have to bid, as does your current vendor. And that's a problem we as Appropriations have, and we've been trying to figure out over the years how to do this in a way that we don't telegraph the numbers, so that that's what we pay. And there has to be a mechanism that we go by doing this, and this is a nice opportunity, I think, perhaps to do that. And so as we work through the next biennium, either through the Appropriations Committee or through the Education Committee or whatever it is, I think that we ought to go down that path. If it's simply a statutory responsibility for us to say, heck with that, if we can get this for $24 million, then go do it. And that's going to give us another 6 to 8 years under our belts, then we want to do it. We want to do the most economical and reasonable thing to perform the function that's necessary. And so we don't want to tie your hands, and we also don't want to have it so you have to expose yourself to automatically raise our costs because we said statutorily you have to do it that way. So I think we just need to study this process and how it works and how we effectuate it, so that we get the best bang for our buck. And we don't have to have a top flight system. We have to have a system that works efficiently and economically. And so to understand all those issues, I'm just submitting to you as dollars and dollars get tighter and tighter. A $55 million ask next year is going to be tougher than a $48 million ask this year. And so that's just kind of my food for thought as we go down this trail, and as you start working with the new Appropriations Committee and the legislative body as we develop this process.
And Mr. Chairman, I think it's important to point out that if this request is not granted in this legislative session, we have a Plan B, which I think aligns more closely with perhaps what you're getting at. And we've been having lots of discussions with the procurement office and the procurement division of A&I. And how we would most likely approach this if this request is not supported is that we would take the information from CampusWorks that we've put together, create an RFP, put that out between now and the next session, so that we could do the RFP contingent upon an appropriation, which vendors are very used to. This happens in states all over the place. It does address the issue that you pointed out, where we're not telegraphing an amount because an appropriation has not been made. So the RFP would come back. We would be able to look through the responses we receive, even negotiate a contract. And then when it comes to our August budget meeting, we would be able to then request a very specific amount with a specific vendor and back that up with, this is the RFP that we used, this is how we chose it. And then we would have, perhaps it would cause less heartburn for the legislature, rather than saying, here's a big number and it's going to be somewhere in there, to rather, here is the number with the vendor that we have chosen for this. Also, I should mention that using that process, the presidents and most importantly, the CIOs of each of the colleges, they are the ones who are reviewing these RFPs and putting the RFPs together. The presidents are making that final decision, but they're basing it largely on the recommendation of the CIOs. I believe that it's safe to say that a general attitude is, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So if there is a way to move forward with the existing vendor that does not require 2 to 3 years of implementation, replacing everything, and that they are but they also feel that this is a robust system that will serve their needs moving forward, they are not likely to spend more money just because they can, because that implementation piece is a heavy lift and a stressful period of time for any institution. So I wanted to provide that Plan B for you because I think it aligns with some of what you were saying.
You guys are also familiar on the capital construction side. In the process, we use level 1, level 2, level 3, and then as we go out to RFPs. And you've seen us evolve to the point that Chairman Nicholas was making, where we provide the Department of Construction a pot of money to then go out and do RFPs for level 1, level 2, step 3, or level 2 and level 3 construction, which has really come back and provided some cost savings. And these system expenditures are as much as some of the buildings we build anymore. And so we've been contemplating and moving towards the direction that we do something similar with ETS, is that we have them maybe go out with an RFP, we provide funding for them, knowing the systems that need to be replaced, whether it be in the community college and in YDOT, the Game and Fish, whatever those need to be, and then allocate or appropriate money to them to then fund that. If we did that, if we said no, and then we kind of moved to where we have a more discreet advertisement of funds that are available and get a more honest RFP process, and I'm not saying that those vendors that are going to respond to the RFP are in any way dishonest, but if you know the money that's available, you want to try and maximize your profit as well, and so we try not to advertise that. So my question to you is with your familiarity working with Department of Construction in a similar manner, would you anticipate any problem in having a similar process if we moved in that way with like ETS or another agency?
Mr. Chairman and Representative Larson, I'm familiar with how that works for capital construction, and I think that makes a lot of sense. I think there's an important distinction to make with the colleges and that computing system and ETS. When we do work with state building, state construction department for CapCon projects, we are working more directly with the state. Those buildings are purchased half by the state, the colleges are providing the other half. With the computing systems, those systems, once we have contracted it, exist entirely at the colleges. And so ETS does not have that same interaction. I don't think it's quite similar to compare ETS and that with the state construction department and the creation of the CapCon buildings. And however, it is important to note that when we go through the RFP process, when we're discussing these things, we very much rely upon the expertise and the guidance of ETS. They're the experts in the field. We get that information. But as far as that funding piece coming from them in some sort of a similar pot of money for those discrete bids, I don't know exactly how that would work. It would take some finesse, I guess, would be my best answer.
You know, and what, as money grows tighter, the likelihood of that 55 million or 48 million or whatever it is coming directly out of your direct block grant dollars increases versus additional dollars on top of it. And so I think you'd have to be aware that, and the presidents have to be aware that as the more expensive it gets, the more it's going to come out of probably your pocket more than our pocket. I just got to understand that. So, or as the likely possibility of it.
Mr. Chairman,
Please.
next. Just a quick question. I understand that you were told by ANI that you have to go out to RFP, and so you followed that guidance. But do you have a clear understanding of the statutory requirement for doing that? Do you know the source of that command?
Mr. Chairman and Senator Nethercott, my understanding in talking with ANI and procurement is that the procurement division is the authority on bid exception authorizations and those policies. So I don't believe that there is statutory language that says thou shalt go to RFP after so many years, but I believe that within the executive branch, ANI and procurement are the final say on whether you can do a bid exception or go to RFP. And so it is more of a application of their agency authority, I guess, than the statutory authority is my understanding. Does that get at your question?
It certainly does, and so it appears it's more discretionary on the part of ANI, at least that's your understanding, and I would encourage you to have further discussions about the prudence of that requirement at this time.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, I don't think ANI is going to get in the way of saving $24 million. So.
And Mr. Chairman and Senator Nethercott, I think it's also important to note that it is, again, I don't want to bias the outcome of a potential RFP process, but I think one possible outcome is that it would simply be a renewal of the existing contract after all is said and done, not only for the cost savings, but also because of the continuity of action, the minimal impact on the day-to-day of the colleges. So I think if we went out to, we can definitely talk with procurement. I've had several conversations with them, but I've not talked with Director Bach at that level.
We'd be happy to sit down on that meeting with them.
Mr. Chairman.
She would love that.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning.
Good morning.
Could you ballpark for me what the cost of this RFP process that you envision is?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Senator Greer, the RFP process itself, because we've been working with CampusWorks, we have a lot of the information that can go together to pull that in. We also have, those are some of the resources that we have within the agency. So I don't foresee additional cost for the execution of the RFP. It would be the outcomes of the RFP is where the cost would be. The estimates, Mr. Speaker and Senator Greer, the estimates at this point are, if we went to a new vendor, probably 53 million for that 5 years. If we stayed with an existing vendor, it would probably be in the 13 to 15 million range. But that is an estimate. We don't have that firm yet. And again, speaking to, we don't want to telegraph numbers out before a bid. That's why it's very much an estimate at this point.
Thank you.
Further questions? Okay. Representative Angeles.
Mr. Chairman, I do have a question just because a lot of us are new. What exactly is the computing or the software used for across all 8 college districts?
That's an excellent question. This is the baseline computing system that runs HR, that runs financial aid for the students. So when students apply for federal grants, it calculates that. It's the student records. It's essentially the backbone of the colleges. And you had mentioned the price and how much, if you broke it down per student, that would be. I think it's important to note, in many ways, this is more important than capital construction to a large extent. If a building floods or can't be used, you can find another building that you can hold classes in. If your system goes down, you can't do anything. We really are tied to these. Could I turn it to Dr. Tyndall? I think he has maybe a few more details about that.
Mr. Chairman, elected official, this is a very huge thing. It's a great question, and sometimes it's hard to explain how pervasive it is in everything we do. If you can imagine every single computer, almost all, like 95% of every computer someone's working on, whether it's financial aid or processing someone's transcript, or every bill and every report that you can possibly do, and your information, your IR system, institutional effectiveness and research, almost everything is tied into this very complex, expensive process. And so I like to describe it as kind of this virtual building that you have 10 staff members to keep it up. In a regular facility, you have, maybe 2 custodial staff and occasionally, one person, kind of the fix-it facilities maintenance person. And this is so much more complex. It's down to everybody's forms and report and how all these systems talk to each other and all these complex databases. And one of those person is just protecting security when people are trying to pretend they're students and they're not. It's just a very complex nightmare. And so when we talk about that, there is a disincentive for the presidents to go to a new system, because it is 3 years of pain and anguish and frustration for every single employee who just wants to kind of kill you. But there'll be features. There are certain reports that they can't do easily and they have to do by hand, and so they do it on a spreadsheet. And you try to choose a system that makes it as most efficient as possible. But we also know it's a heavy lift. It's really, really expensive. And I think if you come to talk to this president, I would say, I don't want that coming out of my budget, right? And so we realize that this isn't like, oh, this is like free money. One thing, it's a pain. It's the grief of changing everybody's computer system and every user and every student and every staff members really frustrated that they're doing this transition and they can't do things anymore. Control F doesn't work anymore, and so it's just a nightmare. So that just gives you kind of on the ground, this is a huge, huge project.
Well, and just to wrap it up, I would say it's an absolute no-brainer that we want the less expensive course of action, and that the next Appropriations Committee will want the less expensive course of action. So I would go to Plan B, and then with the Education Committee, work through the interim, I think you need to keep them up to breast of the process so that you've got adequate explanation and support on the floor when you bring an exception request in the next budget to move forward with it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that's great advice, and we'll definitely move forward with that.
Okay.
Can I move on
Please
to?
proceed, yeah.
Okay. We started with that big ask. These other asks, they're small. You can just say yes on these. The next one is the College Information Technology Security Resources. This is an additional set of funds that we're requesting for cybersecurity and security of our systems. It includes 3 main categories. One is for a security tool implementation. As threats change, and as you probably hear, we're constantly being bombarded, the whole country, with cyber attacks from usually foreign actors. And so the security tool implementation would allow for the purchase of these tools for the colleges to utilize and the commission as well. Another piece are security training for staff. This brings in outside folks so that they can, everybody can be aware of the latest threats and how to address them. And then the last piece are security assessments. Increasingly, not only are security assessments vital so that you can make sure and test that everything is as it should be, but increasingly it's even a requirement for external groups and insurance and things like that. Similar to how a fire alarm is required by your insurance company, these security assessments are increasingly required by insurers. Cyber attacks are very expensive, and if you can stop it from happening.
On these two components, Ben, the governor's recommendation, is it not an emergency, I presume, or what's?
Yes, I can't speak directly to the governor's recommendation, but I do know that he chose a very frugal, that was his term, budget,
So
and
the
was
question-
focused on emergencies.
So the question is, if you bring this in the budget, your regular budget next year, it's not going to put you at risk.
Well, Mr. Chairman, any time that goes by where we have not instituted some of these things puts us at somewhat heightened risk. I can't say that it would not make any difference. If we had to wait until next year, we would wait till next year and we would ask at that point.
Well, I presume when you presented it to the chief executive's office, they assessed that risk and decided it wasn't an emergency.
That is my understanding.
Okay, go ahead.
Just to follow up on that, but you have funding currently, it's just running out this next year. So you're not behind the 8 ball to be caught up with addressing the security risk. It's just as you anticipate moving forward as I read your narrative. Am I misunderstanding it?
No, Mr. Chairman and Representative Larson, that is correct. We do have funding from the biennial budget. This would allow us to address, like a supplemental request does, identified increases that have popped up since that biennium. So if we don't receive this, it was determined by the governor's office that he did not choose, or his office did not choose this to identify this as an emergency. We would have ongoing funding. We would most likely need to move some funding around and find a way to make this work.
Follow up. If you could, on page 24, on the third bullet there under the explanation, it talks about meeting the requirements for accreditation of federal security standards. I was a little interested in that, if you could expound on that just a little bit. How is this impacting accreditation, and what are the the federal security requirements that you're required to comply with?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, given the need to maintain accreditation, these are one of the instances where we would have to move money around in order to make that happen because this is a requirement. The areas where we need to have meet certain security protocols deal with anytime we're dealing with financial aid, with federal financial aid primarily.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, further questions? All right, please proceed.
Okay, thank you. And then our last one is, other than the Wyoming PBS, which I'll lead for Director Kale, the Data Management Application Reporting System Database Administrator. Our Data Management Application Reporting System, we affectionately call DMARS, another wonderful acronym. None of these are boots or, there's so many great acronyms and we always have lame ones. The DMARS system is the system that exists within the commission that brings together in real time the information from all of the colleges. This was born out of the early stages of SLEDS, the State Longitudinal Educational Data System. Right now, it has become really the backbone of the IT system within the commission. All of the reports that we send to you, all the reports that we send out to the feds, that we put out on our website, that we share with the colleges so that they can share it with the feds, these are all generated through that centralized system. Prior to that, it was very much a more decentralized system where we were requesting information to be shared through secure servers, and it was less efficient. So thanks to SLEDS, we were able to put together DMARS. It requires a database administrator, a DBA, to facilitate that. But in the end, this is an amazing cost savings because one person can work on this and saves a lot of time for all the colleges and the commission. That position, because this was born out of a SLEDS initiative, has been funded through federal SLEDS funding. We are asking for this to put this into our ongoing budget so that we take it out of one-time federal funds and put it into state funds because DMARS will exist and serves its very vital purpose within the agency and for the colleges. Even if SLEDS were to cease existing and we were to cease receiving funds, we would still need that position. So this is kind of a rectification of moving a state role back under state funding.
So as you noted that it would go into your standard budget, would this amount that you requested then be biennialized or ongoing?
Our request is that it would be ongoing, that it would be.
It would stay at this level.
It would stay at that level.
Thank
And that amount would not be a new position. Right now, this is a contracted position, and we would keep it as a contracted position. There's a lot of efficiencies that work, that help us with that.
So in your standard budget, it would be 130 some odd a year.
Correct.
Thank you.
So why would we not continue to use the federal dollars while we can?
Well, Mr. Chairman, that would be an option. It would reduce the amount of the federal dollars that could be used on the expansion and full implementation of SLEDS. We could do this at a later point, but it does need to be taken care of at some point. And so we wanted to get ahead of this, particularly since over the past year, something that brought this to the fore was a hang-up on the B11 that we had requested to give us the spending authority to use the second SLEDS grant. That was given to us last November 2023, and it was to fund the next 4 years of the SLEDS project. We didn't have the spending authority to utilize it until, I think, October of this year. And so during that time, we were very much alarmed about what that would mean for the ability to continue paying for this database administrator. So we wanted to get this in this bill. So that explains some of the timeline for this. The B11 has now been signed. We do have the spending authority. So what you suggest would be an option.
So Kevin, any comments on the governor's position?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Kevin Hibbert, Director of the State Budget Department. The process of review on this is integral to what is available in
Closer to your
SLEDs.
mic.
The conversation that's associated with this is what is available in unencumbered dollars and the spending trends of what's available that hasn't been spent, and then also what we anticipate coming in. So we are reviewing the whole process for SLEDs. This particular ask, I don't believe, meets the governor's expectation of unforeseen or unanticipated either.
Go ahead.
Kevin, do we know why it took so long to authorize them to use that SLED's money this last year? That was kind of a
Yes, we were
wonky deal.
struggling getting the statistics.
Say again, please.
We were struggling to get the statistics of where all the funding was and how much was available and the burn rate.
Okay. Just, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? All right.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And that goes through our three primary requests. And if you or the incoming members of JAC have any questions, we're happy to help
Is it
out.
time for Director Kale to come up and tell us what's going on?
We'd also welcome her. I think she has a separate slot. That's why I
Okay.
wanted to.
Any other questions from anybody? All right, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Chairman Nicholas, Chairman Kinski, members of the committee, thank you for having me. I know that your time is very valuable. This is a very simple request that we have. We remain very thankful for the increase to our Wyoming Public Television matching endowment. Thank you very much. It is already helping preserve and tell more stories about Wyoming, and I emphasize Wyoming in Wyoming PBS because that is exactly what the station here in Riverton, Wyoming does. We tell Wyoming stories. That's what's important to me, and that's what my passion is. So, of course, with this increase, we went into a different investment pool that will then, of course, increase our investment results, our investment interest that will be provided to the station. There was a limit prior to, actually currently there is a limit on the amount that Wyoming Community College Commission can provide the station for these interest payments. And so the Wyoming Community College Commission would like to increase that limit to an additional limit of $390,000, making a total of $500,000. And it's just an ability to provide us with that larger interest rate payment. So I would love to entertain any questions specific to that request.
Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just summarizing, this is really an increase in transparency on your behalf so that you don't have to use the B11 process in the intervening time between legislative sessions. Just increases your transparency based on an estimated increase in income, or increase in revenue, rather.
Yes, Chairman Nicholas, yes, Representative Walters, that's correct.
Thank you.
Okay, any questions? That was too easy.
Chairman Nicholas, I would also like to emphasize, we just recently sent out our annual report. This is the first time that Wyoming PBS has put together an annual report of this type, and it will share very vividly in beautiful colors and beautiful video if you scan the QR codes, the work that we are doing to preserve stories in Wyoming. One in particular I mentioned last year that has to do with Lieutenant Lee Alley, he's the most decorated Vietnam veteran in the state of Wyoming. He will be joining us for a legislative reception in January, along with his brother, who is also a Vietnam veteran. And Senator Anderson, thank you for your service. I realize that you as well are a Vietnam veteran. That is our goal. And I emphasize anyone in this room, anyone on this committee, to please talk to me. If you have questions about what Wyoming PBS does and what we are passionate about, I would love to talk with any of you about the only television station that produces films, award-winning films, to preserve and educate the people of Wyoming. Thank you.
Along that line, Director Kale, I think one of the conversations since I've been on this committee early on, that there's been an evolution. When I first came on this committee, Wyoming PBS was not available statewide. And so there was this concern about how we fund these unique Wyoming stories that really are only regional because our population lives around the borders of the state. But correct me if I'm wrong, or if you would explain, that's no longer the case, that anybody with a computer can access Wyoming PBS. Can you just highlight that a little bit, make sure I'm saying that accurately?
Mr. Chair, Representative Larson, yes, that is correct. PBS has actually worked very, very hard to make sure that our live broadcast can be seen as long as you have a high-speed internet connection. Way back in the day when Ruby Calvert was the general manager of Wyoming PBS, she worked very hard to get us on satellite. That's something we don't have to worry about nearly as much, because if you have a Roku, if you have a smart television, if you have any kind of what we call over-the-top device, in other words, if you can download the PBS app in Wyoming, you can geolocate to our station and you will see our broadcast. We are actively working on a campaign right now to educate the people of Wyoming. This was something that recently occurred, and we're working on a campaign to educate Representative Larson on that exact access point. So thank you.
Okay, any questions? Director Kale. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right, anything else? Next up, Don, UW? I mean, oh, that's right, DQ.
Yeah.
We'll give everyone a moment for transition. Keep losing my director. There we go.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Todd Parfit, the Director of the Department of Environmental Quality, and I just want to start out with a few introductions so that those who aren't familiar with the agency know who lead the specific divisions of the agency. First, Alan Edwards is our Deputy Director and Ombudsman. Kimber Wickman, to my right, is the Management Services Administrator. Nancy Veer is the Air Quality Administrator. Jennifer Zigmund, Water Quality Administrator. Suzanne Engels, the Solid and Hazardous Waste Division Administrator. Jenny Staben, Industrial Siting. Don Newton, AML. Brandy O'Brien is the Interim Land Quality Division Administrator. And then Alex Tolson is our Comptroller. And I've asked all of them to be here today in case there are questions related to things other than what's in our supplemental request. So
by the way, that reminds me, have you implemented the new how to climb a ladder exercise in your office?
We've left that to the ombudsman to do that training.
Good.
To start off, appreciate the support of the agency during last year's budget session. We had a lot going on last year. And that being the case, the direction was from the governor and from myself to the agency that we would not have a supplemental request unless there was something that we felt was mission critical. One area that we defined as mission critical was for the uranium recovery program. And this is a program, if you're not familiar, where we have an agreement state status with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. That's their version of primacy, if you will. So if you go to the summary table on page 3, you'll see that this request is for $79,696. And what it is it's for 100 series. It's similar to the air quality program that we established last year to address the 26% vacancy rate in the air quality division. And now that we've seen that we are getting some positive results from that, we had an inquiry from industry, the uranium mining industry and the Mining Association, to pursue something similar with the intent that it would help with retention and recruitment, keeping in mind that this is a 100% fee program. So industry pays a fee to cover the costs of staff and other costs for operating the program. Now, the uranium recovery program is a small program. It has 6 full-time employees, but there's a high demand for the skill set. This program has health physicists, which are in high demand across the country. And what we've seen is, of the 6 positions that we have in the uranium recovery program, the average time that we have somebody in that position is 2 years. And that's hard to get continuity and consistency within a program with that kind of turnaround. And that's with every position. And so we'll spend a lot of time getting them trained up. There's a lot of expense associated with that to the industry. And then they're offered jobs either with other states, with the federal government, or with industry, and they can demand a much higher salary. So as I said, the average time frame is 2 years in each of the positions. So when you look at it, this program was stood up in 2018, and some of these positions have had 3 people in them already. So that's kind of the purpose of the request. And what we did is we looked at applying the same principles as we did for the air quality division last year, where you budget the positions at MPP, and then you put the staff person in the appropriate bucket based on their years of experience. So each bucket is a 5-year window. So there are 6 buckets that takes you to 30 years. And you would, as you meet each one of those steps, you would get 1/6 of the difference of the 90% of the position and the MPP is where they would land.
So Todd, tell us a little bit about the need for these positions and what you foresee to be the workload in the future for this particular division.
And Mr. Co-Chair,
Go ahead.
if I could add, just tag on to that. Last session, I know we asked you to go direct just to the particular ask, but last session and the session before you came in, and there was a tremendous backlog of applications and licenses, and there was additionally a problem with litigation, and you asked for a large number of positions. I don't think we gave them all to you, but I think we gave you quite a few. And along with the chair, I'm just curious where we are on that backlog and whether our prior actions have ameliorated that, because this is a pretty small ask relative to what we've seen in the past. So I'm assuming that things are okay, other than this one.
Yeah, so, Mr. Chairman, Senator Kinski, yes, we did ask for a fair number of positions. We had a backlog of activities, mainly because we had a 26% vacancy rate within air quality, and most of those positions were associated with the air quality division. And since that time, we have filled all of those positions, but a lot of those were filled internally. So you still have a vacancy, so we're still catching up with that. But we have seen the vacancy rate in air quality as a whole. Right now, we're sitting pretty steady at about 13 to 14% vacancy rate. So about half of what the vacancy rates were.
Are you getting job applications in?
We still have some positions, Mr. Chairman, we still have some positions where we don't get any applications. And these are some of the entry levels, so the ENNR and ENEG 8s. And then the other is with the ENE Engineer 10s, because they require a PE, and the salary just isn't competitive at that for somebody with a PE. So we have some positions that we're getting applications now, but there's others where we're still not seeing any movement there. Now, we are doing some things with the University of Wyoming and some other universities in terms of setting up internships, trying to create that pipeline from the university to the agency. Other things that we're doing besides the internships, we're participating in the job fairs more frequently. And then we've been over and met with the University of Wyoming specifically for their air quality program and to create that, again, that pipeline. We've also incorporated in instances where we have 0 applications or we can't find somebody that will accept the salary that we're offering, we do offer a signing bonus, if you will. And that can be up as high as $2,000 for a signing bonus.
And so, particularly for the members-to-be, with the DEQ, the importance of having a fully staffed office to allow us to have maximum development of our natural resources around the state is critical. And so you are the pipeline that we have to go through in order to develop our coal, oil, and gas. And so without you being fully staffed, our production and our ability to have income to the state of Wyoming and to service jobs in Wyoming diminishes. And so we want you to be fully staffed, and we want to make sure that you or your staff are adequately compensated so we don't lose you. So that's what we did last year with the Air Quality Division, and we asked you to do it. I mean, it's not like you come in begging to us. We say, damn it, tell us what you need. And this is another example of that, I presume, is that for the uranium side of it, we need to have a little bit better system so that you can keep those positions filled. Is that fair?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, that's a fair assessment. Correct.
Now, let's go back to the question I asked. What do you envision, because this was just stood up in 2018. Explain why this was stood up and what's going on.
Mr. Chairman, there was a lot of concern with the industry when the program was being implemented by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission because they couldn't count on efficient processing of permits, and they were missing the peaks and getting their permits in the valleys, which was problematic. And so we looked at becoming an agreement state because we can permit in about half the time that it takes the NRC, and we can do it for about half the cost. And either way, they pay a fee. They either pay the fee to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission or they pay the fee to the state. In either instance, it's a fee program. And so and that's why we stood that program up in 2018, was to give some breathing room for the industry and get those permits processed quicker to help meet those peaks in terms of price for uranium. The system has worked well. We've been maintaining that about half the time that it was taking. So we're still managing through this. However, I think the industry, rightfully so, is concerned with the rate of turnaround, and that they're dealing with new people all the time, and they have to get up to speed. They have to go and get the training that's necessary for the program. And we want to make sure that we maintain the agreement state status, and we get audited, so to speak, periodically by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to make sure that we're meeting the requirements of the program.
Mr. Chairman?
We got a couple, so,
Okay.
go ahead, Representative Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So kind of saying it again, when it was the industry that came to you that's requesting that we get the agreements state status, and in doing so, they agreed to pay the fees that would cover the cost to operate that program. So then today, when you come before us and you say that this ask will be paid for by the industry because that was anticipated by industry because of the efficiencies it provides to them to do their service, is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, that is correct.
And then, Mr. Chairman, just to follow up, Wyoming, thanks to the good work that you guys have done, is one of 3 states that have primacy on Class 6 wells. And the Representative Walters and I just come back from Energy Council in Salt Lake, where the energy states, 17 states, Director Parfit presented how we accomplished that. He's very highly regarded across the nation for the expertise of this agency and the work that they've done in doing that. And just want to say thank you to the agency and director, to you individually, for taking your personal time to come down there and present to the rest of those states. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Anderson, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, this URP gives us primacy on uranium. We have primacy on other things and are doing a good job with that. The industry thinks that it's important that we have primacy. Could you delve a little into that? Exactly what primacy do we have? Is it just on tailings? Is it just on new contracts, or is it primacy on more than that into the uranium business?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Anderson, it's for the licensing for the mining and milling of uranium and thorium. And so all of the licenses were transferred from the NRC to the state. And I don't have the number of how many licenses currently, but we do the licensing. Now, it's limited to the to certain materials associated with the mining and milling operations. It does not, we could have sought agreement state status for other things like hospital waste, laboratories and things like that, but we kept it very narrow to just the uranium mining activities, mining and milling.
Mr. Chairman, follow up?
Go ahead.
So will we have to do the appropriation for the mill down there at Willow Hill? Will the new buyer of that, will he have to reapply and be certified?
So, Mr. Chairman, they'll have to have the appropriate licenses in place, and then they would pay the fee, and it's an annual fee that we assess at the beginning of the year. And then based on the costs for that facility that we incur, they'll either make an adjustment and pay us any difference that they might owe us, or we will provide them with a refund prior to the next billing cycle.
Go ahead.
So are they they are now certified by the NRC or not at all?
Mr. Chairman, if the licensing is for the mining and milling, it would be through the state.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Parfit, you had mentioned that we are able to permit in half the time. That's a great accomplishment of the NRC, and also at a lower price. Could you elaborate on the price differential between a permit obtained through the NRC versus a permit obtained through the state? And then further, with this additional cost of additional help to get these permits handled to a standard that the industry is asking for, what will be the change in the permitting fee to accommodate these new employees? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman and Representative, the cost of the program, and I'm just trying to remember the history on this, but the cost of the program originally, when we looked at this, was about $3 million to the industry. And then for us, for the state to implement, the cost was about $1.5 to $1.6 million. And then you divide that amongst the different licenses based on their particular activity in any given year. We're not adding any additional FTE, but what we are doing is adding, and in this instance for the budget, $80,000 would go to each one of those 6 positions, depending on where they are currently in the range for salary for that position and the midpoint, the MPP. The idea is that we would fund all of these positions at MPP in the budget, and then if, say, somebody has 15 years of experience, then we would adjust their salary such that they would get halfway between the 90% and the MPP would be their new salary. And so overall, that $80,000 is what the difference is between where they are and the MPP for those 6 positions, if that made sense.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman? Please. Yeah, that does, and thank you for that clarification. So that $80,000 is going to be spread out over all these, you will add to the fees to cover that expenditure then. And so it'll probably be very minimal to these permit holders.
Mr. Chairman, that's right. That would be added to the fee that's assessed, but in the grand scheme of things, I want to say we have maybe, I don't know if Brandy's here, we have 14 licenses, so it would be split amongst them.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman?
go ahead.
Mr. Chairman,
Please.
there's no hotter topics in the nation or the world than uranium right now, and rare earth elements. So I think it's awfully important that we gear up with our people as much as we can, do everything we can to help our industries produce these products out of Wyoming. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes, I would agree.
Go ahead.
Todd, just a similar follow-up, but I would ask, because is there a fear within your agency that as you are able to get this talent, that there's an ongoing risk with this heightened need that these people would leave us once we get them up, like we've seen in air quality previously when we didn't address those needs? We had these highly skilled people that were crafting the permits for industry, and we lost them. And it really put us in a difficult position, and we're trying to protect that. And I would just assume that that's an ongoing concern that you have.
Mr. Chairman, that's correct.
Okay, anything else, Todd?
No, Mr. Chairman, just to kind of to summarize, I think we've covered most of the points here. But the governor recommends this, and I wanted to point out that the request is to have this be effective April 1. So there's a portion of the recommendation there's a portion of the fee that would be one-time and a portion of it that would be biennialized. And just wanted to point that out, and that's because it would be effective April 1. So the first 3 months would not be biennialized, it would be one time, and that's $15,000.
For you, the new JAC people, what we do is then we turn and we look at Don Richards, we say, make sure when we're working the budget, or the supplemental budget, that you bring that up so we don't forget. And it just goes on the calendar so that if you have it effective immediately and/or how the allocation of dollars is. So Don will be reminding you of that when we're working. All right, go ahead, Todd.
Mr. Chairman, that's all I had, and stand for any further questions.
Any more questions for Todd? All right. Good seeing you all.
All right.
Thanks for coming. Yeah, let's keep going. We got half an hour before a break.
Morning, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to all of you for having us this morning. For the record, I'm Ed Seidel, and I am president of the University of Wyoming, and I'm proud to be here in my 5th year as the president. I want to thank you all and the legislature for years of great support that I think is paying great dividends to Wyoming. And I'm joined here by VP Budget and Finance and CFO Alex Keene to my right, Interim Provost Scott Turpin, who's sitting right back here, Athletic Director Tom Berman, who's sitting to my left, and VP for Government Affairs and Community Engagement Mike Smith, who's back there we go. So if with your indulgence, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to just take a moment to let you know about some updates from the university. And this is your university. It's doing some great things, I think, for the students and for the state. And I'm pretty excited about where we are. I understand that there are challenges and there are headwinds nationally for higher education. But I want to say that just like the state of Wyoming, we are bucking those national trends. There are clearly enrollment challenges across the country, and our enrollment at UW this year is basically flat, down less than 1% from last year, and that is very significantly better than the national average. This year we had 906 incoming freshmen from Wyoming, the second highest number of resident freshmen we've ever had, so we're doing quite well in this regard. The demographics at a national level are challenging, which means we have to do better to recruit from a shrinking pool of students, both in-state and out-of-state, to Laramie. But we're putting resources towards improving our recruitment efforts. More students are applying than ever, and we also are showing increases in retention of our current students. So they're more successful, and we're working very hard on that. UW remains an incredible value, particularly for Wyoming residents. Nationally, over 60% of new college graduates are burdened with student debt, but at the University of Wyoming, that number is just 39%, with an average debt of about $24,000. For Wyoming students, those numbers are even more impressive. 86% of Wyoming high school graduates receive some form of a Hathaway scholarship. And for those students with the Hathaway, about 67% graduate without any student loan debt. So we're proud of those figures. They're among the best in the nation. UW is focused on its land-grant mission and ensuring that our students can pursue their preferred line of study while in college and use their degree. That's an important point. People go into the workforce and use their college degree upon graduation. The statistics are clear that a college degree is still the most consistent path to increased earnings over the course of a lifetime. And we know that a student who participates in one paid internship while in college is 50% more likely to get a job that requires that degree, and then to get on that path towards higher learning or higher earnings. And we're working with the Wyoming business community and other stakeholders to make that paid internship available to our students. It's one of my top priorities. We have evidence that our collective efforts are bearing fruit, and we've grown annual research expenditures to over $160 million annually. And we will be named what's called an R1 university, the highest classification given to research universities. And this enables us to find new ways to better take advantage of our natural resources, such as oil and gas, enhancing energy production, mitigate fires, better serve our rural healthcare needs, and to recruit faculty and students. We continue to build our economic impact on the state of Wyoming. The Center for Business and Economic Analysis just completed a study a couple of months ago that puts the value of UW's annual contribution to the state's economy at $720 million. But when you include impacts from alumni, that figure rises to over $1.36 billion per year impact on the state's economy. We pride ourselves on that impact and the connection to the entire state. In a recent study conducted by the Wyoming Survey and Analysis Center at UW, 64% of those people surveyed rated UW's performance in engaging their communities as either excellent or good. And I spend a lot of my time crisscrossing the state meeting with communities. About 77% rated UW's performance in, quote, providing an excellent undergraduate education, rated it as excellent or good. This work has been recognized by those outside the university. Last year, we earned Carnegie Foundation's classification for community engagement, and that took a lot of work internally and with our partners to achieve. There are always areas to improve, of course, and we're dedicated to that work, but I'm proud of our students and of everything our talented and committed faculty and staff are doing to provide that great experience. So we're looking forward to working with many of you in the upcoming legislative session. Ask for your continued support so we can maintain the momentum we built in supporting our legacy industries while also supporting innovation and entrepreneurial efforts that help grow the state economy. So I'd like to move on, if it's all right, Mr. Chairman, to the supplemental asks. And the overall priority requests are found at Agency 67 on page 19.
Go ahead, please do.
All right, thank you. I won't focus on this chart, but that just is a list of the overall requests that we made, but I would like to focus then on the ones that the governor specifically has recommended, but I wanted you to see the entire priority list. One thing that's not on the list, but has always been a priority of ours, is working for employee compensation and inflation requests for utilities, and that's been dealt with typically at the enterprise level. And I just wanted to note this, even though it's not listed. The two raises that you've helped provide for us over the last 3 years have been welcomed by our employees, and I think have really made a big difference in addressing longstanding market inequalities and recent inflationary pressures. So let me move on to page 29. I can get to page 29 myself. Moving on to page 29. Our budget request is perhaps really the primary budget request that has been recommended by the governor that came from the university. Is for $1.5 million for our athletics department to begin to address the loss of NCAA revenue pursuant to what's known as the House settlement. I'm sure if you're following college sports, you've seen this. $2.8 billion has will be made available for past athletes. It's a settlement of 3 pending lawsuits related to compensation of past athletes, and also the need to grow scholarships for athletes to remain competitive. And if it's okay, I'd like to ask our athletic director, Tom Berman, to provide some more detail and to answer any questions.
Go ahead, Tom.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, President Seidel. I will try to be brief but thorough. Finishing up a little bit of what President Seidel mentioned, the House settlement. What is the House settlement? It's 3 lawsuits brought by student athletes against the NCAA and the conferences regarding limitations to compensation and NIL, name, image, likeness. The settlement includes roughly $2.7 billion in back damages to athletes and a form of revenue sharing going forward starting in 2025. It has been granted preliminary approval, and all expectations are it will get formal approval here in April with a start date of July of 2025. Financial implications for UW and all Division I schools include immediate reduction at the University of Wyoming of $550,000 annually that the NCAA has provided to its members via conferences as part of back pay settlements with the plaintiffs. Changes to scholarship rules, which allow schools to scholarship more athletes in nearly all sports. This means that schools that do not offer more scholarships or additional scholarships will be at a disadvantage competitively. As part of this agreement, the NCAA has agreed to roster limits that are set by the settlement, and those limits are the maximum amount a school can offer in scholarships. For example, football is currently at 85 scholarships and has been since the 1960s. Under the new rule, a football team can have 105 players max, not 106, not 107, 105, but all 105 could be on full scholarships. Another example, just to put it in perspective, is a sport like women's volleyball, women's soccer, which have had a cap of 12 in volleyball, will go to 18 in the fall of 25. The cost of this could be immense. If you assume that these are all full scholarships, football at 20 scholarships additional would be close to $900,000 just for football. Obviously, the University of Wyoming isn't looking to do that, but we are looking to grow our scholarships. It's important to remember we have a Title IX challenge that we are always managing. Under our current model, any investment in men's scholarships requires a 2x investment in women's scholarships so we can reduce our financial disparity between the two. We haven't had to really worry about that for years because we haven't added scholarships, but now if we're going to add men's scholarships, we've got to add women's scholarship at a greater rate because our delta there is significant. So our annual scholarship investment plan would be in 25-26 would be to add 3 to football and 1 to men's basketball, add 3 to women's volleyball, 2 to women's soccer, and spread 3 among other women's sports. 26, we would add 1 additional to football and men's basketball and 4 to women's sports. And in 27, we would add 1 to football. And at that point, we would reassess and see where we are. Additional costs created by the NCAA ruling and the House settlement that started in 23-24, mandatory health care for all athletes postgraduate. So any athlete who is injured while they're playing, we have to provide health care for 2 years postgraduate, post-eligibility. Estimated costs, it'll vary every year, but we're going to say $250,000 as a placeholder. Mandatory postgraduate scholarships for 2 years after eligibility expires. That cost, we assume, will be about $150,000. Most of our student athletes graduate on time, but there would be a few that would not graduate on time, and under the current rules, we will have to pay for their graduation or give them 2 full years of tuition and fees as part of this. So initially, we requested $3 million of ongoing state aid as an addition to our annual support. The governor recommended 1.5 million in one-time funds, correct, Alex? Yeah. And I'm here to answer any questions. The world of college athletics is changing dramatically, but we just feel like this is an opportunity for us to grow our program and keep up. And we are hoping that between the university, the state, and the private sector, we can cover all these costs. Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So help me understand this. Is this 1.5, is this basically a way to pay for the settlement?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Salazar? No, there we go. In essence, it is, some of it would be a way to repay the settlement because we're losing $550,000 from the NCAA that we get annually. And they're using that to handle the back payment for student athletes. And every school has a different number. It's based on the level you're at. So if you're in the FCS, you might be required to pay, FCS meaning Idaho State. They might be required to pay $300,000 annually or not receive $300,000. If you're at Alabama, it might be $2.8 million. At Wyoming, it's $550,000. And it's for 10 years that we would not receive that supplement from the NCAA. I hope that answers your question.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman. So what is the final settlement amount?
Back pay is $2.7 billion.
Thanks.
And so what court is this in?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Nicholas, it is in California, I don't know which court, but the Judge Wilkin has preliminary approved it, and right now it's in the stage where people can comment.
So I guess my question is then, assuming that there's a settlement that has been signed off by the NCAA, and then theoretically, do universities or colleges have the option to opt in or opt out of the settlement?
Mr. Chairman, the answer to that is yes, but as a member of the Mountain West Conference, we're going to opt into the settlement. And I don't know of a school that's not in the 133 Division I schools.
So, and then my question is, what's the likelihood of an appeal of whatever that settlement is on the underlying requirements that's forcing the settlement to begin with?
Mr. Chairman, you're asking me to comment on stuff I'm not an expert in, but I will do my best. It appears that this settlement is going forward. It's been in the works for 2.5 years. And the NCAA has embraced it, and all the conferences have embraced it. And there are schools that are lining up to begin this process structurally, starting in end of July. So is there a chance it would be appealed and it would be stayed in some form? Yes, but it appears it's highly unlikely. Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I'm still back on this $500,000 annual minimum that we would have to pay. And am I understanding that that would come out of this 1.5 million? That if in the event that goes through, we'll take that 500,000 out of there and we'll start paying off for 10 years? Mr. Chairman, Senator Anderson, the answer to that is yes. We're not actually paying it. We're just not receiving it from the NCAA. NCAA is going to hold it and not distribute it to us, so they basically notified us saying, University of Wyoming, you're going to get, it's a formula, so we'll know exactly at the end of the spring, but somewhere between 500 and 550 less every year for the next decade as part of your portion of this settlement. And then the additional cost of the House settlement are some of the things I lined out, whether it be the mandatory postgraduate healthcare, mandatory postgraduate education, and the additional scholarships that were negotiated as part of the settlement.
Representative Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ken Pendergraft, House District 29. My questions are similar to yours, Mr. Chairman. This, I think I heard that this has been in the works for 2.5 years. Therefore, this isn't really unforeseen at this point. The judge isn't due to rule until this fall. And there is a possibility of an appeal, and so I'm having trouble classifying it as emergency. So I'm wondering, why is it being brought during the supplemental? Why was it not brought in the last budget or held until the next? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, to follow up on that, the final ruling will be in April, not in the fall. And we did not know the amounts. The NCAA just notified us 6 months ago as to the amount that we could be receiving less. And the 2.8 billion was finalized, I think I'm gonna say in this summer, like June, the amount. So we've known there were lawsuits making their way through the system. We didn't know when and what the settlement agreement would be until the last 6 months.
Further questions? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Berman, you mentioned that this is a withholding from the NCAA, and I assume that is from the ticket sales, television donations, and merchandise sales, or is that revenue stream coming directly to the university? And if so, why wouldn't that, that revenue stream be used for this purpose? And if it was, does that create other burdens, other hardships? Where do those funds go to if they're not going to this particular $1.5 million expense?
Mr. Chairman, the monies that we receive from the NCAA are not ticket revenue donation money. They are money from the NCAA men's basketball championship primarily, and all sports championships. The NCAA, other than football, manages the sport championships for men's basketball, women's basketball, all 31 sports, whatever there are. And they have revenue streams, and then they share it out with the schools in a very complex formula. But we don't take our revenues from ticket sales, donations, merchandising, licensing, rentals, et cetera, and give it to the NCAA. But we are going to have to grow all those revenues to handle all these additional costs going forward. And so that is been a very strong focus of ours. How can we be more creative, more entrepreneurial, and generate more revenues? And we've been pretty successful in that, but the costs, we have a $45 million budget. And prior to these additional costs, you got to assume you're 2.5% inflation every year. So you're at about $1.5 million every year in just inflationary costs, whether it be healthcare, travel, et cetera. I hope that answered your question.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman. Again, what kind of hardship would it be if you were to take the 1.5 million and then eventually the 500 million per year, the 500 million per year? No, it's 500,000, the 1.5 million and the 500,000 per year out of your ticket sales, out of your other revenues.
Mr. Chairman, the hardship would be we would have to make cuts in some areas that would be pretty substantial. Because of the total cost, when you factor in all the things that we're trying to do in this settlement, is north of 1.5 million, probably closer to 3 million, which we are going to generate a large portion of that 3 million from our efforts, whether it be ticket revenue, corporate sponsorships, donations, et cetera, to cover that. But if we didn't get any money from the state and we had to handle all this on our own, we would probably be looking at sport elimination and making some very draconian cuts.
And so essentially, every Division I college in America is paying a contribution to this buy-in. And the mid-sized schools like us, or the smaller ones, it has greater impact because it's harder for us to add those new scholarships and the costs of all that incurred, simply because we don't have the foundationary funds that the larger schools have.
Mr. Chairman, you're exactly right. All of my counterparts are looking for additional revenues, whether it be from states, students, universities, corporate, private, whatever they can find. Many schools are looking at student fees. That's not a focus this university wants to go down. And I respect that.
And so what, the first payment will be due at, obviously sometime after the judgment comes in. And then it's an annualized payment.
Yes.
Roughly 500,000 per year for 10 years, correct?
Correct.
So I'm guessing that the governor's office said it's premature to pay the 500,000 at this point, or what's the position?
Mr. Chairman, I think that's true, but there's also another conversation that we had all throughout the summer. And that is what we felt would be the amount of money that we would have available in ongoing revenue. And in our profile, as you know it, it came out in the October Craig that we only have $24.5 million of ongoing revenue. That's questionable if that's going to continue on, or if we're going to experience, reductions in oil prices and that kind of stuff. But we were very sensitive to any request that's subject us to ongoing revenue. But the profile also has one-time money available. So we structured our recommendations predicated on what we felt we could do with our ongoing money. Now, in all reality, that'll shake itself loose in the next profile for the next budget when we build the overall budget. And we will still be sensitive to commitments for ongoing revenue rather than one time.
Mr. Chairman, if I can clarify, the 500,000, we receive our NCAA monies on June 30th. We'll receive 500-ish thousand less this year. They will take it out this year as soon as she approves the final settlement in April.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
So will you be coming back every supplemental and biennium budget for this amount?
Assuming that we get approved on one-time dollars only, I guess it's possible, yes. If it was ongoing, we wouldn't be.
Okay. Go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. And I'll move on, but I want to make a comment on this topic, just to say that, as I'm sure you all know, I'm on the board of the Mountain West Conference with the other presidents, and we have increasingly a number of emergency meetings about everything happening in college sports. We had a 2-hour meeting yesterday, and we are all expecting, not sort of hoping this won't happen, but expecting it is happening, and everyone is preparing for it. So, all right. If I could move on, Mr. Chairman, then I'd like to move to page 32, which is the second item on our priority list. It's essentially a placeholder for a legislative priority, not driven directly by the university, although we're very supportive. And many of you on this committee will recall that last year, a footnote 13 to our budget directed the university to review regional opportunities for expanding medical education and training for Wyoming students. And we've done that work. We believe, after a number of things that we looked at, that the best route to achieving this, for increasing the number of slots for medical students for Wyoming residents, is pursuing a direct relationship with the University of Utah School of Medicine. And we've made multiple visits to Salt Lake City. I was there myself, and we've developed very strong relationships there. And if it's all right, I would like to ask Dr. Ben Chan from the University of Utah to come up to the table and give a little bit of background on that program.
That'd be wonderful. Come on up.
Morning, Ben.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, everyone. I'm happy to be here. I drove up last night, and let me just start. Thank you for letting me speak here today. My name is Dr. Benjamin Chan.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, it's on.
Oh, now again. A little rusty, I apologize. I'm the Associate Dean of Admissions for medical school, as well as Associate Dean of Idaho Affairs. I'm also the Senior Director of our ROOT program, our Rural and Underserved Utah Training Experience. I'm also a child and adolescent psychiatrist by training, so I do have a clinical responsibility in Salt Lake City. I would like to start off saying that our two states share a very close history and culture together. Our medical school for decades had an agreement between the state of Wyoming as well as Utah. That was ended in the 1990s, and something that's very personal to me because I came back and went to our medical school between 2000 and 2004. My close friend, Dr. Kyle Jensen, was a Wyoming resident, and he lamented that lack of connection between our two states. He was one of the last to come through. When I became Dean of Admissions in 2012, I approached our senior leadership and said, let's get more Wyoming residents back to our medical school. And they enthusiastically replied yes. So based on our shared culture and background, we have 3 Wyoming students come every year. And they are some of the best and brightest in our school. However, to fully implement, to address the Wyoming physician workforce needs, we envision creating a pipeline. To make a doctor, just imagine a pipe. At the beginning of the pipe, we need a strong K through 12, also undergraduate experience. We look forward to working with our partners at the University of Wyoming. We have research opportunities, ambassador opportunities. We want to work closely to make sure we have the best and brightest coming out of University of Wyoming to our medical school. So that's the first part of the pipeline. The pipeline itself is our students with 5 spots will come to Salt Lake City and be educated by some of our top educators as well as faculty members. These students will have research opportunities, they'll have small group learning, they'll have a state-of-the-art anatomy lab. They would be among the 125 other medical students at our university. And then the back part of the pipeline would be the opportunity to eventually build graduate medical education. Our goal is to have as many Wyoming students return to Wyoming to do clinical experiences and rotations. We have a program called Root Scholars, where we have many Wyoming residents participate. They come back to Wyoming to do public health projects, to do clinical rotations. They work with Wyoming physicians and learn in an apprenticeship model. So that's the short of our program. I can go into more detail, but I also just want to reflect that as a child psychiatrist, I work in Salt Lake City. I'm a hospitalist, so I take care of kids with depression, suicidal thoughts, eating disorders, and when I'm on service, I'm struck by the amount of Wyoming children that come to our facility. So for me to address the mental health crisis, to address the work shortages we have in this state, this makes an amazing first step to build the relationships with the University of Wyoming as well as all the stakeholders here. I really look forward to working together, and I am open to questions.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead,
Mr. Chairman, so the students would spend 4 years in Laramie at UW and then transfer to Utah, or would they go all the time to Utah?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Anderson, great question. They would come for the first year in Salt Lake City. Our goal is to have them return to Wyoming for their second or clinical year, the entire year. So they would do rotations such as family medicine, pediatrics, surgery. Years 3 and 4 would be up to them. Some of them would come back to Salt Lake City. I think a large portion of them would stay in Wyoming to do further experiences. So it would be primarily Salt Lake City based, but with an emphasis to return to Wyoming to get as much education as possible.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, sorry for my absence, but it sounds, could you describe, and you may have already said this, but it's my understanding that the WICHE program for the U of U School of Medicine is a much less expensive proposition per student than the WWAMI program with the University of Washington. Could you describe that?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Stith, great question. I cannot speak to the particulars of the WWAMI program or WICHE. I do know that having a direct contractual relationship would reduce a lot of ambiguity and sometimes anxiety among the students about where their funding may come from or what will happen during excuse me. I think right now the WICHE program covers a part of the tuition, but I do not know if it covers all of the tuition. So,
Mr. Chairman, follow up. If someone were to say that it was $36,000 a student for the University of Utah School of Medicine cost to Wyoming, but the WWAMI program is many multiples of that per student, would you agree with that?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Stith, that sounds accurate. I can always get back to you with the numbers to be more accurate.
Having personal experiments, why don't you tell us?
Yes. Mr. Chairman, Mike Smith with University. I would confirm that the WWAMI program is, of the two that we offer, is the most advantageous to an individual student. The WICHE program, each student pays more out-of-pocket cost, and the state of Wyoming pays a lower subsidy to that program through WICHE than the WWAMI program.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, if you'll bear with me, because I've been, myself and Senator Dockstader have been involved in kind of facilitating this conversation. I'd like to outline to the committee some opportunities that we have here with the University of Utah. So we've outlined that we've got our WWAMI program, which we've established as the premier program for educating medical students in Wyoming. 20 slots, go there, maintain that. It's the cheapest for Representative Stiff's question. For Representative Stiff's question, that is the cheapest. Then you've got WICHE, which pays the difference between the out-of-state portion is the most expensive to the student. So Senator Dockstader and I, after our WICHE flub up here a few years ago, when we got that, when we went down to meet with Dr. Chan then said, how do we get you guys to, we'd love to have you fill more slots. Cha-ching. And so when we started working after this last session and with this footnote with the previous provost, Senator Dockstader and I approached the University of Utah, and we were trying to figure out, as we present to you, what would this look like, and how we envision, certainly isn't chiseled in stone, is that we maintain WWAMI as the gold standard, the most advantageous to Wyoming students, where they come back and after 3 years, they don't have to pay anything back, right, to the state. They have their portion that they pay. WICHE, similar, but they pay more. And so we identified someplace in the middle to put the University of Utah. So these 5 students, total cost is $146,000 a year per student. The student would pay $40,000, the university $106,000. They would have to come back to Wyoming to practice. If they didn't, they had to pay the state back, similar to what we do with WWAMI. Now, if you go, as we've had these conversations and look at this, if you look at the University of Utah's website and see an out-of-state tuition is at $87,000. Well, why then are we paying $146,000? We had that conversation, Senator Dockstader and I, and Dr. Chan with his people, and here's what happens is those kids, out-of-state kids that come to the University of Utah, paying the $87,000 a year, 30% of them stay in Utah. It's worth Utah's effort to subsidize that tuition to get those doctors back in the state. Now, their legislature, somewhat similar to ours, as they look at this program, are saying, why, if we're going to educate these Wyoming students and they're all going back to Wyoming to practice, why then are we asking the Utah taxpayers to subsidize them? And so that's the difference, is we're getting all of them back, and University of Utah is not getting any. Now, if they did elect to stay in Utah, they had to pay Wyoming back. Okay, so that's kind of the fee structure, and there's a handout that'll show you that I think is coming to you that identifies that. So in this request, it gives an outline on page 32 and 34 of $500,000 one-time funds. Well, it can't be one time. It's going to be ongoing and then added to, because each year you're adding you're going to add another 5 students. And so the end, once we get up to year 4, you're going to see an annual cost of $2.1 million to educate these additional doctors that would come back to the University of Wyoming. The footnote said to have the University of Wyoming explore, identify, and see the potential. This is the 3rd time since I've been in the legislature that we've given that assignment, 2014 and again in 2016, in 2021. And so the question, as you recall, has always been, what's a plan B if WWAMI gets too expensive or if something goes south? We've had concern. We know that they've talked to the University of Wyoming. We wanted to facilitate that because we feel anxious because there is a real healthcare need in the state of Wyoming that is not being filled. Okay, here's an option, okay? We all are gonna have to decide on that. We think it's reasonable, we like the structure. We've got these kids paying back on this $40,000 a year. If you want to reduce that to 37 and make the state's portion higher, okay, this is just a good starting point that we think is reasonable for the state. Mr. Chairman.
Well done. So any other questions for Ben? Representative Angelos, please.
Mr. Chairman, and I don't know if you'll be able to specifically answer my question, but my question is, what is the retention rate of WWAMI, not WICHE, not WWAMI? What is the retention rate of those doctors after they've fulfilled their commitment to the state of Wyoming? From what I'm hearing in my medical professionals back home, they're leaving the state. So I would just like to know if you have that data of that retention.
The answer is we do. Alex or Mike, I had this at my fingertips 2 years ago when we were 21. And it's actually remarkably high in terms of percentages. It's more like 60-40, 65-45 of my recollection. But go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Mike Smith, Representative Angelos. So the number the chairman is referring to is for WWAMI. It is quite good. It's above 60% of those students have returned to Wyoming and fulfilled that service requirement. Happy to kind of expand on that and get the representative further statistics on how long they stay and so forth. It's a 3-year requirement, so technically a student could fulfill that requirement and then leave, but a remarkable high percentage don't and continue to practice in Wyoming. The WICHE numbers are harder to give you. Here's why. This kind of what I'll call a supplemental approach to medical education has not been in place that long through WICHE in the state of Wyoming. The length of time it takes to move through the entire medical education system, do all your clinicals, do all that, we don't require them to return and start fulfilling that obligation until they're completely done with their education. And there's just been a very small number who have gone through all that program and gotten to the point where they're either in Wyoming or paying us back. So those statistics are kind of hard to get to be anything meaningful. But we do have a couple, and I can also gather those up very quickly in the next 10 minutes and get them to the representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And if I might, Dr. Chan, could you just help us understand the uniqueness of the University of Utah's rural program that you referenced, and then the opportunities that these students would have to come back, how you set up the preceptors here in Wyoming to work with those students?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, great question. The program I'm in charge of is the Root Scholars, Rural and Underserved Utah Training Experience. We take applicants from rural backgrounds, we matriculate them to our medical school, and then we give them an enormous amount of support. We have a speaker series, we provide research opportunities, and the key that you referenced, Representative Larson, is that we build relationships with community physicians to send them back and learn through the apprenticeship model. So I have someone on my team right now, Dr. Leiden, who went to the WWAMI Wyoming program, is based at the University of Utah School of Medicine, and has relationships. And we're starting to send some of our students back here with those doctors so they can learn from them. And they desperately want to stay in Wyoming. And so that is the key piece of the program, taking students from rural areas, giving them a lot of support, a lot of opportunity, and sending them back to do as much of their training and education in these rural areas.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman. So I believe in the conversation when Senator Dockstader and I were down there, we heard some of our witchy students that had been at Hot Springs County Hospital, and another that had been at Indian Health Service in Fort Washakie.
Yeah, Fort Washakie, Lander, Thermopolis, Evanston, Rock Springs, Rawlins.
Thank you.
Like, it's impressive what we've done. And I would like to thank my team. I would like to thank President Seidel, Scott, Mike, all the people I've met on this journey, yourself, Representative Larson. We're really trying to do the right thing. And this, being here today it's been like a culmination of years of hard work on my team, because we kind of saw this vision of, I just see these Wyoming students coming to our school. I met with them before I left. They were very excited I'm here and representing them. When I asked them, why did you choose our medical school over WWAMI or over some other medical school, it was almost spiritual. They talked about how a lot of their friends and family came to Salt Lake City to get their health care, a lot of times when they were kids. And they felt this obligation almost to come to Salt Lake to get educated and to return back to Wyoming. So I hope I represented them well today. It's very nerve-wracking to be in front of all of you, but I'm just so excited to be here and talk about our program. President Randall, my president of the University of Utah, extends his thankfulness to President Seidel and his team. We see this as a first step in working closer together, our two great institutions. So again, I really like to thank you all for being here today.
Well, if you might also follow up on Representative Angelo's comment, is that Wyoming, and I think other rural states, are starting to lose hospitals and lose physicians. And I presume that you have that same issue, or you see that in our region. And this is, in effect, one of the ways to overcome that issue that is hitting particularly our smaller communities.
Mr. Chairman, I agree with you 1,000%. To me, this is the future of healthcare, of rural healthcare. We need to get more students into medical school and go practice back in these rural areas. Every physician who practices in a rural area creates 20 jobs. Nursing, pharmacy, techs, all those things. And then that helps support the hospital. These hospitals are closing in your state, in our state. To me, this is critical. This is needed. And to me, it's the right thing to do.
And then in addition to that, you take the numerous issues that come up almost every other year at least, of the changes that WWAMI imposes over, meaning University of Washington, on our hospital students, on our students, so that they spend more time here, less time there, to having clinical exercises and various relationships, plus costs, and limiting the number of us to expand our students. We have that problem as well, so.
Mr. Chairman, so to a certain degree, but the vision I have, again, I meet with the Wyoming students. They know I'm here today. But I've also asked our entire student body, who here has ties to the state of Wyoming? I see dozens and dozens of hands come up. So with this program, I can envision a future where you start getting Utah students practicing in Wyoming. And to me, that's the good stuff right there. If we work closer together, if we collaborate, that leads to better results. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman?
Who's that? Oh, go ahead.
I'm back on this first year at UW, second year at Utah, and then optional. The first year at UW wouldn't be the $146,000. That would be whatever UW charges. Is that correct? And then they wouldn't pay their $40,000 until they went to Utah for the second year? Or would the student be paying the $40,000 every year, and we'd just be paying the $106,000 every year they went to Utah?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Anderson, the way the model is constructed is that money would come to the University of Utah because the students would be at the University of Utah for the first year, and then we would send them back to Wyoming for years 2, 3, and 4, to the best of our ability to get their medical education. But that money would continue to come to the University of Utah, but we would work with our partners as far as like setting up those rotations, those preceptorships back in the state of Wyoming.
Mr. Chairman, may I add something to that, Senator Anderson? I think there's a little bit, we're passing in the night here a little bit. There is no point in time in this program that a medical student would be attending school at the University of Wyoming. There is an arrangement on the WWAMI side of things where they stay in Laramie for their first 18 months of basic coursework, but that would not be the case here. So they would be enrolled at the University of Utah School of Medicine. The University of Wyoming's only connection to this will be to administer the program on behalf of the state of Wyoming. These students they may have clinical experiences at hospitals or with doctors in Wyoming, but that all would go through the University of Utah, and they would be coordinating the program. They would receive the full tuition for all 4 years. Thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, on top of that, so all the undergraduate work, the kids would graduate from the University of Wyoming in their undergraduate work, make their application to the University of Utah to be accepted into the medical school. Then the medical school in its entirety is in Salt Lake. Mr. Chairman, if I may, follow-up question, and I'm going to dance on some delicate ice. I apologize, but I think it's probably worth the conversation having. I think Utah is somewhat similar to Wyoming on some of their social views on a lot of things, and when we get into healthcare and those types of things, that gets a little dicey and a little political that sometimes physicians don't like us sticking our nose into. But can you share with me, Utah, the University of Utah, their medical school, do they have, what are their DIE requirements, or what do you guys, can you shed a little light on that?
The what kind of requirements?
Diversification, inclusion, and.
Oh, okay. DEI,
Yeah.
all right.
DIE, so forgive me.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, great question. Our medical school follows state law. Last year, House Bill 261 passed our legislature banning the words diversity, inclusion, yeah. Sorry. So, yeah, they're banned, so I can't say it. Yeah. That was for support services within our medical school. We follow Utah state law to the T. And happy to, in regard, if this comes to pass, happy to look at any language and contractual agreements between our two in states to make sure we align with Wyoming law, but happy to make sure that we follow state law on both sides.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman. Please. Just wanted to put one more plug in for the University of Utah School of Medicine. Thank you for being here. As you know, the current director of the National Institutes of Health is a University of Utah School of Medicine graduate, Monica Bertinoli, and also a native of Sweetwater County, Wyoming.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, Representative Stith, really excited for the support. Again, I'd like to emphasize that our Wyoming students currently in our med school are some of the best and brightest, and really thankful for your support and having them come to our state.
Mr. Coacher. Dr. Chan, I wondered, since you get around the country a lot, going back to Representative Angelo's question about retention, and you might have seen what other states have done to up the amount of retention of students in their state for medical practice. In Wyoming, I know from personal experience with a relative, that other 40%, it's not that they necessarily don't want to come back to Wyoming, but particularly if they've got a specialty that's much in demand, they can look at what they're being paid in another state, go take out a loan, pay off the University of Wyoming, and still come out money ahead. And so it's a significant economic issue. It's a pay gap, a big pay gap between what they can earn in a rural state and other states. Have you seen what other states have done to try and overcome that gap by any chance in your travels around the country?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Kinski, that's a fantastic question, and it's a very complicated question. It's going to be challenging to fix, but I can give you my lens as an educator. I talked about the pipeline. In the middle is our medical school. To me, you get higher retention rates when you start building what we call residency programs or graduate medical education. When a student at their 4th year, they enter something called the match. To become a board eligible or board certified physician, you need to match into a residency program. You can't practice as a physician just going to medical school. You need a residency on top of it. That helps determine your specialty and where you're going in your career. Every day I'm approached by different departments wanting to grow their residency programs. Through our hard work, I'm going to reference Idaho, through our hard work in Idaho, we're able to build an Idaho rural psychiatry program. They spend 2 years in Salt Lake City and 2 years in Pocatello. I've had conversations the past couple of years with representatives from the Department of Surgery, Department of Neurology, and the Department of Psychiatry and Family Medicine, asking me, is there a way we can send our residents to Evanston, Rock Springs, Thermopolis? With this agreement I'm hopeful for, this is the foundation of building graduate medical education programs, because those retention rates hover closer to 80%. Because you're sending a resident after they graduate med school back into their rural community where they're a fully functional doctor and they're recruited to stay. Like this is nationwide. You build a GME program, graduate medical education program, that helps retain those students to practice in those areas. So
Senator Dockstader, do you have some
comment? If I could, please, thank you. Chairman Baldwin cut me loose to work on this last summer with Representative Larson. So we chased it, went down to Utah, visited with those folks, because if there's anything we can do for this state is set them up with good physicians. And it seems to be that general practitioners are the key. I'll take you back to the far west, where I just came from, 3:30 this morning. I drove over here just to say this to you. We had a hospital that was down to just 3 general practice physicians. One was retiring. And they cut loose of the management company and said, let's do this with a local hospital board. And they took the focus and moved the focus onto adding general practice physicians. And over the past 20 years, this is what they put together. 8 physicians and 9 PAs. This is Afton, Wyoming, serving Star Valley. 3 orthos, 2 hospitalists, 1 pain anesthesia, 1 OBGYN, 2 anesthesiologists, 2 CRNAs, and 6 board certified ER docs, and 1 cardiac PA over the last 20 years. But they built it on the basis of bringing family practice physicians in. Once they brought those in, then all the other services came. And you can walk into that hospital, and I've taken the last 3 governors through on tours, and there's all the state-of-the-art equipment that's needed there, an ample supply of family physicians, and we have tapped into this program with 2 of our homegrown guys. They're come back, one's an ortho, one's a general practitioner. This is a successful program, and this is how we build rural healthcare across the state of Wyoming. And in a day of closing hospitals, we're opening our 2nd on this first week of January in Alpine. We're opening up what's kind of a mini hospital, a clinic, a surgical area, and 24/7 ER care. And it'll all be served by these same docs that go back and forth. And in a world where it's closing and shutting down, we've found the solution. I invite any of you out there to see it. We've found a way to make rural healthcare work, and we built it on rural family practice physicians. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay. Any closing remarks or finish up? Dr. Chan?
Again, I'd like to thank everyone for the opportunity to be here and talk about our school. And again, thank you for our wonderful students that we have. I'm really excited about the future.
Well, we are too. Okay. Any other questions? Mr. President?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say special thanks to Ben for coming over and pass on our regards to President Taylor as well. This is a sign of a deepening and perhaps broader collaboration with the University of Utah. I had dinner with President Randall and team at his house last year. I know that they're currently visiting NVIDIA on a joint project that we're talking about building a facility that could take advantage of the NCAR Wyoming Supercomputing Center. So you'll see more about this going forward. So it's very genuine collaboration. Thanks, Ben. So,
Thank you for being here.
Thanks. Just to close then, Mr. Chairman, I don't have any other specific requests to talk about on the UW side, but I did want to take just a second to say how much we support the governor's request for $5.2 million for the Wyoming Innovation Partnership for the final Phase 3 of the program. I think it's done great things for the state and certainly brought our university together with the community colleges towards outcomes around economic development and workforce development that I think we just hadn't had before. So I'm very proud of what we've done there. I'd like to thank you all for your work. I'm going to miss seeing some of you regularly on this committee, but I look forward to getting to work with others that are joining. I particularly want to compliment Representative Walter's choice of tie. I seem we have similar tastes. And I want to thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. Any other thing with UW? All right, it's 10:24. We'll take a 15-minute break.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, members of the committee, as well as members of the incoming committee. I'm Dr. Holly Krecka, Executive Director of the University of Wyoming School of Energy Resources, otherwise known as SER. SER was created in 2006 to focus on Wyoming's largest industry, our energy sector. We're part of the University of Wyoming, so we can leverage all the incredible talent there, and we operate under the rules of the university, but we also have a separate governance board, the ERC, and I'd like to acknowledge this committee's own Senator Anderson for serving on that committee for many years. Under the guidance of the Energy Resources Council, SER works with incredible collaborators at the University of Wyoming, across the state, industry partners, Wyoming elected and appointed officials, all towards our mission to advance energy-driven economic development for Wyoming. We educate students, perform research, support the research of others, and have numerous outreach activities all focused on supporting Wyoming's energy sector. We work on all energy types, but we're particularly focused on Wyoming's fossil fuels, and everything we do is in service to the state of Wyoming. Our role in the state is defined by statute, and we take it very seriously. So today I'm here to talk about one specific area of our research program that has a supplemental request associated with it. It is focused on one of Wyoming's core foundational industries, the coal sector. As you all know, we've seen a decline in our coal industry by over half since 2008. Having come to SCR from Peabody, that's more than a number to me, and we'll do everything we can at the School of Energy Resources to support the state's energy sector, including its coal sector. One of the areas that we're focused on to support Wyoming coal is our carbon engineering program. So looking at large volume ways to use Wyoming coal other than energy and other than burning it. As part of our carbon engineering program, we have two processes that make different feedstocks that are used in a series of products. One process is called pyrolysis, where we create a coal-derived char using heat and a low oxygen atmosphere. The other process is solvent extraction, and that is used to create a solvent extract used for asphalt binder. Today, we're focused on the first, the pyrolysis unit. The pyrolysis unit creates this char, which is used for lots of different high volume products, including soil amendments, and that's an amendment you can work into soil. We have a couple different reclamation projects to see if it can help with reclamation. We're also working with entities in the agricultural sector. It also can be used to create construction materials and other products we're looking at. So the carbon engineering program truly is a success story. So this legislature gave us funding that we invested across the University of Wyoming and beyond to invent these new processes and new products. And that has scaled up now beyond the lab scale and beyond the pilot scale. So we have lab scale work going on in Laramie, pilot scale work going on in Laramie. Now we're ready to demonstrate those technologies. And this legislature has already given us funding to demonstrate those technologies. That work is occurring in Campbell County, Wyoming, near the nation's energy capital, Gillette, at the Wyoming Innovation Center. So we have already begun for this pyrolysis unit for our demonstration scale. We've already nearly completed detailed engineering. It is already under construction. We have equipment on site and we've gone through a lot of procurement. So let me talk about the timeline for this overall pyrolysis demonstration project. We developed the cost for that project in calendar year 2021 and came to this very meeting requesting funds to design, procure, and construct a pyrolysis demonstration. So that was in 2021. Then that funding was appropriated in March in the legislative session 2022. The funds became available to us July 1st, 2022, which is fiscal year 2023. We got to work right away, but during this whole time, the nation was seeing historic inflation, and that's what we faced as well. So here, our supplemental budget request today is focused on addressing inflation for our pyrolysis demonstration. It's an ongoing project that's already started. It is one-time funding, just to be clear. So we've worked really closely with our partners, Wood Group and their Sheridan, Wyoming office. They're doing our procurement and construction, and they will be doing operation of this facility. And we've done everything we can to hold down costs. Even so, I'm coming to you today to ask for $2.09 million to address historic inflation. And again, I just want to reemphasize, we've done everything we can to hold down costs. First-of-a-kind projects like ours really were particularly vulnerable to some of the inflation we've seen across the U.S. So in short, we're grateful for the state's support for the School of Energy Resources to invest in new ways to use Wyoming coal. Due to inflation pressures outside our control, our costs have increased, and we're requesting your assistance to address that. And that's really all I have. That's so, except to just say thank you again for all your support over the years.
Okay, questions for Holly? Thank you. Holly, can you, I don't know that I quite captured where you're at in this whole process. So you're in design and construction, or is construction done and this is operation? Inflation, help me understand that again, and you probably said, but I missed it.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, good question. So the inflation, we have not started operation. The inflation we're talking about has occurred on design, procurement, and construction. And so we've seen, that was what that original $8 million covered, and we've seen all those costs go up. So where we are today is the detailed design is nearly complete. There's a little bit of piping left to do in the design, but we've gone far enough that we've been able to start getting bids for large pieces of equipment and all our higher cost items. And that's why we are coming today, is because we really have a good handle on what it will take to finish these three parts, the detailed design, procurement, and construction. And we do have equipment on site installed. So we have actually already started construction of some of the shorter lead time items.
Yeah, thank you.
So how did you put together the figure that you have?
So, well, we've been working on the detailed engineering for a long time, so we knew kind of the cost escalation that occurred there. And we've gone through the University of Wyoming required procurement process to go out to bid for these large pieces of equipment. That's what really allowed us to put this number together, is getting those bids back, which were higher than what we thought they would be when we initially developed these costs in 2021.
And tell us what you're going to have at the end of the day if we provide this.
At the end of the day, we will have enough money to finish the project we've started, which is this pyrolysis demonstration at the Wyoming Innovation Center. And the reason we need this is because we need this demonstration for two different reasons. We needed to produce this char at higher volumes because we're really limited on the amount of testing we can do for the product. So essentially, the faculty at the University of Wyoming that are developing these different products are waiting in line so we can develop enough char. So if they want to change the formulation, they have to wait for us to produce it. This will end that. So we'll have enough. And you think about like a soil amendment test, you need pretty large volumes to do that. So we worked with the College of Ag, Life Sciences, and Natural Resources to test at a smaller scale, but we want to test large plots. So this will enable that. The second thing that it enables is refining the process, how we're going to operate this, and like really understanding the temperatures and the heat input so that we will have really solid economic costs for a commercial system. And then this is the last step before we can work with commercial partners that, would take this to a commercial scale. So, but we have to get better information so that they will truly understand their costs, both on the products and on the process. And so this project delivers all of that.
Okay, any questions for Holly?
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
Holly, this is really specialized equipment that you're bidding out, and there's not a lot of people that produce it, and that kind of catches you also, doesn't it, with if they inflate the price?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Anderson, that's a really good point. So, that's what I was kind of referring to is if there's been an influx of federal funds into the energy sector, who wants to take on the job that's a one of a kind, which is what we're doing. It's a first of a kind, but that's also our job as innovators and inventors for Wyoming. So, but we do have the costs in-house. But just for example, you really hit the nail on the head for our pyrolyzer. We're looking at a very long lead time to other items because it has to be built custom for this project and for this demonstration.
Representative Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ken Pendergraft, House District 29. I have a background in construction contracting. And this conversation to me, of course, I'm coming out of private industry. This conversation to me sounds 2 to 3 years old. Most of our projects suffered the worst inflation a couple of years ago. And since that time, they've kind of tapered off and smoothed out. I guess I'm asking why now? Why, we didn't see this a year ago? Is it perhaps because the wheels of government grind slowly? And so now we're just catching up to that, or can you enlighten me a little bit?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Mr. Chairman, that's a great question. I'm just going to face forward, if that's okay. That's a really good question. So the way we asked for this funding was to do design, procurement, and construction all in one pot of funds. And so that is why you're just seeing it now, is that the rate of inflation has leveled off, but the incremental amount is still much higher than it was than the costs were developed. But we didn't want to come back and not be sure about the number we were asking for. And so we actually have had to go out to bid. And so that does take a while. And so I wouldn't blame government. It's just that this is a multi-year project, and we asked for the funding to support it all at once, which is how we run many of our research and demonstration projects. And always happy to give more detailed information offline as needed.
And so just to follow up a little bit on that, you may have heard our earlier conversations about trying not to foreshadow how much money projects have, because that tends to be the cost. I mean, the contractors will match the cost versus the actual cost. But you're already past that stage.
Yeah.
These are costs that you have gone out for bid for, and so you have hard dollars, and this is what the cost is going to be.
That's right. Mr. Chairman, I would say the University of Wyoming has some pretty strict procurement rules. We have to go out to bid for all of this. So this is not one entity like building all this equipment. We've gone out to bid and tried to get the most competitive prices possible.
And then just to give some more background history on this whole prospect and the School of Engineering, this project is created basically by the legislature. Mm-hmm. And we did it in order to sustain and continue mining and the use of coal in the face of the lack of coal being used for general electricity. And so this is an alternative to continue the use and continue of mining and operations of coal in Wyoming. And that's the whole purpose of this.
Agreed.
Go ahead, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So 2 questions. One, because I'm curious, is this like coal gasification? Exactly what is it? And then the second is 30,000 foot view on the timeline. So obviously, as you walk down this road, we're not now seeing enough money to complete project, but where are we at on that process? Is it like 6 months from now? Is it 9 months from now? Is it 2 weeks ago? Exactly where are we at? And so the 2 questions, first of all, just kind of maybe a little broader scope and sequence of this project, because I'm just mostly curious about it. And then the second is that funding timetable.
Okay. Okay, well, Mr. Chairman, yeah, this is one of 2 processes. So you're asking, it's not gasification. In fact, let me answer your question on schedule, and then I'm going to put our coal products expert on the hot seat to give you the details of the difference between pyrolysis and gasification. Okay, so in December, let's see, we will be we've already started site construction that will continue in March of 2025. Our biggest single long lead item is the pyrolyzer, which is the main piece of equipment. Everything else is kind of auxiliary and supporting that. So that, if we can order it soon, will be on site. It is the long lead item for the very reasons that I was mentioning to Senator Anderson's question, because it is a one of a kind, designed specifically for this project. And so that will be on site in November of 2025. And then we will be able to complete, everything else will be ready by then. That's our like last item. And then so we can start up in commissioning in December 2025, and with weather-dependent quotes on that, just assuming that we have the weather we need to commission that. But we are looking end of next year, early next year, or end of this, end of 2025, early 2026 to do startup and commissioning. And Mr. Chairman, if I may, I would like to hand it over to my colleague to answer the question about the difference between pyrolysis and gasification.
Good morning. Thank you. My name is Trina Pfeiffer. I'm the director for the Center for Carbon Capture and Conversion, and that is the center that houses the carbon engineering program. And so basically, the pyrolysis unit that we're constructing is not a thermal pyrolysis. Thermal pyrolysis is basically where you take coal and you heat it up for a long period of time, right? Okay, so this is actually different. This is basically, you have a high temperature, not a lower temperature, but a high temperature, 800 to 1000 C roughly, and then it's very, very, very quick residence time, less than 1/10 of a second. So it's a flash or fast pyrolysis, which is what we're trying to do. So it's not gasification. Okay.
And Mr. Chairman, I'll just add to that, just as we're geeking out here for a minute, that gasification converts most of the carbon in coal or any fuel to carbon monoxide. And then it also makes hydrogen. Whereas right here, we're trying to make a coal char. So most of the carbon stays in like a pure solid form that is a char.
Is it similar to that brick over there?
It is, there is coal char in the brick, as with other materials.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So looking at it, and maybe I'm off and I'm new to this, so looking at it, the School of Energy Resources, 42,857,808, and then this adds another roughly 2 million onto that. Does that cover this project, or is that just the entire department, or what was the overall cost of this project whenever you first gave us an idea of what it would cost? And so obviously you're asking to take an increase, but what was the original cost of the project?
Great question, Mr. Chairman. The original cost of the project was $8 million. So that number that you're quoting was not, there was no funds for this project in that 42 million. That's our general operating budget and then other one-time funding unrelated to this.
Just give them a quick background of SER.
Okay, so the School of Energy Resource, I skipped that part because I heard we were doing no fluff, but I shall go back. The School of Energy Resources was created in 2006, and I mentioned that part, under the guidance of the Energy Resources Council. We are a standalone unit, like a college or we're school because we're multidisciplinary at the University of Wyoming. But the way the School of Energy Resources works, we have a couple different functions. We have an undergraduate academic program that it's called Energy Resource Management and Development. We also have a minor and 2 certificates, and we work with other units across campus. So essentially the idea is that we're focused on the energy sector. We stay really close to industry. We work with our or the Energy Resources Council, and we make sure that we're aware of the most important things to Wyoming's energy sector that we can be working on, whether it's outreach, whether it's academic and instruction programs that educate students, or whether it's these big research projects. And so we use some of the funding the state gives us. We're almost like a mini Department of Energy for the state of Wyoming. So we invest in the University of Wyoming to leverage all the great intellectual minds there to focus on Wyoming-specific energy issues. And this carbon engineering program is one of the best examples of a success story. I mean, it might seem slow, but getting from, an idea that like you should do something to use coal for something else in 2016 to where we're moving into the field and demonstrations in 2024 is really fast for research. So it's just been a great success story, and I think that it's a good illustration of how SCR can work with the others to do some really novel things focused on the state of Wyoming. And then, of course, Mr. Quillinan, Scott Quillinan here to my left, also leads our entire research portfolio. So that includes centers of excellence across the university that we support, and an internal research team that is one of the best in the nation in competing for competitive funds. So, and like I said, we have basically any topic that would benefit the state, we're interested in working on it.
And Mr. Co-Chair, if I may build on that for the benefit of the new folks, and I may get some of this wrong, but don't correct me, I really like my version better, but SER is actually a creature of the legislature. It was created by the legislature as a mandate on the University of Wyoming to assure that there was work that was ongoing in the energy sector. And so this is, don't get focused on a single research project and the ask for that. There are multiple research projects as part of a graduate and undergraduate education program to make sure that energy research is a priority for the university. Now, I don't know how long ago it was that the university actually wiped out the petroleum engineering program, if you can believe that. And that's been rebuilt over a period of time along with SER. So SER is much more than this one ask on a supplemental budget. It is there for a very good reason, and a reason that I think all of us in this room can support. Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair.
Mr. Chairman?
Please.
Mr. Chairman, to add to that, in that 2006, before Holly came to the SER, the legislature decided that the University of Wyoming was cutting back on engineering. And there were some engineers in the legislature that wanted that program to be continued ad nauseum. And so it came to pass that we put up $20 million for a separate organization within University of Wyoming for engineering. And that engineering covers a whole gauntlet of engineering. It's expanded incredibly compared to what we started with. Holly has accumulated an incredible staff. We're recognized worldwide as being one of the energy schools of renown. And we started that 20 million. Then they went out, SER went out and got money from federal government and from private enterprise. And I think there are over $100 million that they brought into the University of Wyoming now already to study and engineer things. So it's a really big deal, a good idea by the legislature in 2006. I wasn't here when they did that, but there was some powerful engineers that were here and did it, and it's been great, and it continues to be a great model for the world to look at how you do engineering in a university. Thank you. Wouldn't you agree?
Okay, any other questions for Holly? Any other questions from, all right. Anything else, Holly? Okay.
No, thank you. Just want to thank all the members of the committee that we've worked with over the years.
Thank you very much. All right, next up. Is yep. Boom, boom, boom. Welcome. Please proceed.
Thank you. I'm Ron Whitman, Director of the Enhanced Oil Recovery Institute, located in Casper, Wyoming.
Hold
Mr. Chairman.
that mic a little closer.
I'd turn it on there.
Good morning. My name's Lon Whitman. I'm a Director of the Enhanced Oil Recovery Institute, located in Casper, Wyoming. We were legislatively created in 2004 by state statute, creating the Enhanced Oil Recovery Commission, Agency 070. And EORI is basically their operating unit for the URC. We're currently a staff of 11 located in Casper, all basically technical people, petroleum geologists, petroleum engineers, along with support staff in GIS and data. Our mission by statute is direct collaborative work with Wyoming operators exclusively, with a mandate to reduce what can be between 30 and 60% of oil that's left in reservoirs in Wyoming. So today we have a supplemental budget request, which hopefully is relatively simple. We're asking for one new technical person who would lead what we call strategic partnerships. It would be corporate interface, project development, and project management. It's a role that I had previously at ERI before becoming director. It's a critical role that we do put someone with a technical background in that can speak the language with the operator and help develop projects and ensure that projects move forward effectively. In addition, we haven't had any type of office support, I believe, since 2019, and that would be a great benefit to us to add a position for an office assistant. Our work levels have increased significantly over the past few years, specifically interest in CO2 EOR with 3 developing projects in Wyoming currently. And additionally, we focus most of our time with small operators, though it may not make a large impact on the revenue books for Wyoming. We are very proud of projects where we would work with oil company X, and his production of 100 barrels a day doubles to 200 a day. We do a lot of that type of project work. So we're across the scale from small operators to mid-size, not so much with the big guys. They don't really have a need for EORI or team support, technical people helping their staff. But we do focus largely with the small operators, mid-size. We do have a current project with Oxy, so it's not out of the question. We've worked with Devon over the years, Anadarko. So there is interface with Continental, some of the larger companies. We haven't had a lot of shale work at ERI. However, the interest to store CO2 in shales and increase production from shales is definitely on the table more and more. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer those.
So if you might, just explain the need for it this year versus next year. In other words, why is it supplemental request?
Mr. Chairman, I think the supplemental request is coming now because the work request has increased to the point where we're saying no to certain projects. With a small team, we're limited on what we can do and what we can provide. So rather than waiting, we decided to put this in as a supplement and get it into this current budget cycle.
Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you. Lon, could you, so you had this position, and there's one that you was filling, and somehow it wasn't filled back in 2019, if I understood you correct. And so if you could just recount why, and maybe that's part of the 2021 step 2, step 3 reductions, that rather than fill it, you took this cut or sustain that reduction in staff. But can you just kind of give us a little background on why that was never filled?
Mr. Chairman, yes, there were budget cuts through that period that did affect us. I believe we lost 4 positions, or funding for 4 positions through that phase. Moving forward, we felt it was absolutely more critical to ensure that the technical people were covered in the agency, and positions like an office assistant were not high priority. But I think as the people become and are getting busier and busier, that type of work would be better left to someone to do the ordering, to do the general things, working with EORC, et cetera. That just was not a filled position after those budget cuts.
Any other questions? Representative Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ken Pendergraft, almost said headquarters, of military sneaking back up onto me. House District 29. I have a bit of an understanding of the early days of the EORI and what they were doing, and building major pipelines to get carbon into fields to increase the production. But that pretty much, correct me if I'm wrong, that seemed to dealt with larger companies that were able to do some sort of a project like that. So I would like if you could elaborate a little bit on what it is, how you're helping the smaller companies now, what is happening there. And then the second question, I heard you say something about storage and carbon, and is a portion of what you're doing related to carbon sequestration? That basically is my question.
Mr. Chairman, answering that question, the pipeline development largely for CO2 was handled through the Wyoming Pipeline Authority. That wasn't anything that EURI was directly involved with, but there is definitely some truth that the statute creating EURI initially was to see how to expand and develop at a fast pace CO2 EUR in Wyoming. There's huge reserve potential for that. So that was a premise behind the creation of EURI, expansion of CO2 enhanced oil recovery projects. That has happened to some degree. Those large companies largely are not operating any of those floods at this point. Anadarko, starting Salt Creek and Monell, those two fields were sold to Fleur-de-Lis, that was sold to Contango, a much small, well, Contango isn't that small, but certainly smaller than Anadarko. Devon sold their fields to Denbury, who's now part of Exxon. Exxon is evaluating how they situate moving forward with CO2 EOR projects in Wyoming and their pipelines to be determined. But what we are seeing are smaller operators who have been involved in CO2 EOR with larger companies buying properties in Wyoming with the goal of implementing CO2 EOR projects. We have 3 of those with much smaller companies that are able to get funding, financing, have the wherewithal, the technical background, et cetera, to develop those projects. You should see one online by TR operating the summer of 2025, which will be the first new CO2 EOR project in Wyoming in 12 years. So we're quite pleased with that. Our work with small operators can be across the board. There are numerous fields in Wyoming that have never been water flooded. They've never seen secondary recovery. As I mentioned, in any standard field, you're going to leave between 30 and 60, even 70% of the oil behind if these secondary, tertiary type technologies are not applied. And that is ultimately the mission of EOR, whether it's a small independent, and as I said, going from 100 to 200 barrels a day is quite significant for a small operator. Field on the other scale, Monell, developed by Anadarko, went from 17 barrels to 7,000 using CO2 EOR. We like those, and those make a quite nice mark on your state revenue. So we like to be involved in those big projects, but we're also remain focused with smaller operators on whatever we can do to help them increase their production.
Go ahead. So Lon, would it be fair to say that sometimes the term enhanced oil recovery can be confused with Enhanced Oil Recovery Institute, and that your institute really is to help producers with technical advice and research on how to increase that, whereas the term enhanced oil recovery and implementing that infrastructure to do that can be an exercise completely different?
Mr. Chairman, that's very accurate. But it was absolutely created, EORI. Senator Tom Strzok very much behind the development of EORI at its origins. I knew Senator Strzok quite well, In fact, those conversations and myself going to EORI initially was largely due to Senator Strzok and Peter Wold, both who with others were very involved in drafting that legislation initially. Governor Friedenthal at the time, there was incredible interest in how specifically to get CO2 into the Bighorn Basin, where there had not been pipelines developed into that basin where there are large reserves available for enhanced oil recovery. So yes, the name EORI and enhanced oil recovery, there is kind of a interesting dynamic there. What I do enjoy is when people are referring to EOR and they refer to EORI and then correct themselves, because we are right in the middle of that dynamic. But it is much clearer, or it's perhaps more correct to say EORI is involved in minimizing any stranded oil in Wyoming with whatever technology or approach we can use to help an operator get that out.
Mr. Chairman?
Okay, please, go ahead. Senator?
Mr. Chairman, Lon, aren't you getting ready to gear up for what's going to happen January 20th? That new administration is asking to increase production everywhere, and that'll be Wyoming, and I'm sure you're getting some calls now for people that are anticipating that and are going to move on, so you are needing more staff to enhance that operation, I think.
Mr. Chairman, I think that's a very good question, Senator Anderson. We do work closely with Senator Barrasso's office. We were involved in the development of the new 45Q legislation that they're putting through, which levels enhanced oil recovery and dedicated storage at $80 a ton. Their office continues to believe that bill will get passed. So yes, there is a lot of interface with the federal side as well. And back to the earlier question, EORI does not really get involved in the capture areas. We're not into dedicated storage. There is storage through enhanced oil recovery, which is the benefit. But as far as actual projects working with capture, that's much more in Dr. Krutka's world. If the project highlights CO2 for enhanced oil recovery through their capture project, we definitely get involved and work with them on that. We also have the pipeline data that was held at EORI after the closure of the pipeline authority. We had two people join EORI from the pipeline authority, our Deputy Director, Roger Hillebush, and Kelly Vlastos, who leads our GIS efforts, came to EORI through the Wyoming Pipeline Authority. We've maintained that data, updated the data, advanced the data. We have an interactive pipeline system on our website where you can go in and look at pipeline information in Wyoming. That also is very active right now, largely in CO2 movement. It's an incredibly helpful tool. In addition, with that pipeline data, there was what is known as the Wyoming Pipeline Corridor Initiative, with funding from the legislature to develop corridors available in Wyoming with space for additional pipelines. The idea being, and that did receive a federal record, and it is included in 9 of the 10 BLM offices in Wyoming, to facilitate pipeline expansions, spurs and trunk lines through identified corridors where there is space. And the goal being that the permitting process will be shortened and minimized through the knowledge coming out of this pipeline corridor initiative. That's also getting a lot of attention in the state and federally. I've made 2 presentations at the National Association of State Energy Officials on the corridor initiative. It is a unique never been done anywhere in the US. And I might add that EORI is also unique. There are no other EORIs in the country. I've been to Oklahoma, Texas, and Kansas, legislatively looking at how to create an EORI. No other state has been able to do it. So we're quite proud of that, and I think we're in focus on what the state needs and our desire to minimize the stranded reserves. We'll have a report out in February that I think you'll be quite impressed with. We've thrown around a lot of numbers, and you've probably seen some of those. Oh, we've brought back, 135 million. We've developed this many million barrels of oil. We decided, not being able to stand behind some of those numbers that were created before I was director, that we would use an outside consultant, registered petroleum engineer, licensed, to come in and evaluate all projects done at EORI since 2004 and look at the incremental production due directly to that collaborative work with EORI and the operator. I can give you a nice estimate of close to 70 million barrels through projects worked at EORI on the incremental level and associated tax revenue close to 600 million. We'll have that report out in February. It will be fully detailed. You'll see exactly how all the calculations were done. For instance, there were always questions, what kind of oil price did you use to do that? This time we went back, this engineer went back month by month with actual Wyoming oil prices associated with the production that month. So we feel extremely good about those numbers. We also only reported before severance taxes. This report will include severance and ad valorem. So I think EORI does contribute in a significant way to the return on investment. 53.7 million you funded EORI since 2004 for a return on your investment of close to 600 million. We're very proud of that.
Any other questions? Pete, do you have any comments you want to make?
Mr. Chairman, I'm very surprised, but if you're going to give me the opportunity, absolutely.
All right.
That's amazing. Pete Obermueller, Petroleum Association of Wyoming. I won't take too much time. I just want to highlight both from Dr. Krutka's presentation and also Director Whitman. Both SER and EORI are critical to the missions of my members in developing oil and gas in Wyoming. Specific to Director Whitman's conversation, let me just put some numbers to it, Mr. Chairman. EORI has produced a report, you've probably all seen it, that Wyoming has significant reserves that can only be accessed through secondary and tertiary recovery. Something in the order, and Director Whitman will correct me, something in the order of 75 oil fields with at least 10 million barrels of oil recoverable through CO2 and CO2 injection. That's significant. Something in the order of, and again, Director Whitman will correct me if I'm wrong on the numbers, something in the order of 2 billion barrels of oil recoverable in that way. At some point, and I can't project when, but at some point, every reserve of oil in Wyoming is going to need enhanced oil recovery, even the most critical areas in the Powder River Basin. They're new and they're shiny right now and producing enormous amounts of resources. Some of the wells drilled today in the Powder River Basin are breaking records nationally in terms of their production, but at some point, they all leave some amount of oil in the ground. Generally, as the director said, somewhere in the order of 60 to 70% of oil in place needs to be recovered in a secondary way. Enhanced oil recovery is hugely important to the future of oil recovery in Wyoming, and I'm grateful to SER and to EORI because they are both so focused on commercializing this research and making it tangible and real for Wyoming's producers and employment and obviously government revenue. So I'm happy to answer any questions, Mr. Chairman, but I came over here for these two presentations specifically because it's so important to us.
Okay, appreciate your comments.
Thank you.
You bet. Anything else? All right, Lon, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
No. You're assuming correctly. So Don, are we a half hour early?
Yeah, we have the Department of Corrections, if you wanted to take them before lunch.
Let's jump in.
They're in jail.
You're confined.
That's corrections. Number is correct.
80.
God, I swear I saved it. Let me see. Welcome, Director Shannon. How are you?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm well.
Please
And
proceed.
yourself? Thank you. Please proceed. Mr. Chairman, Co-Chairman, incoming committee members, I'm Dan Shannon with the Department of Corrections. To my right is our Chief Financial Officer, Ashley Miller, and directly behind me is our Deputy Director, Heather Babbitt. I'm pleased to be before you today, and I want to thank you for taking the time to see us, be as expedient as possible. Mr. Chairman, with your permission, I would like to make one brief comment. It's less than 2 minutes, it'll be under 2 minutes, if your permission, then we'll get right into our.
Permission granted.
Thank you, sir. Committee members, I want to acknowledge the hard work of our staff. The Department of Corrections mission is simple. It's public safety. We don't arrest, commit, or release individuals within our state. The public should have the expectation that we return individuals better than we receive them. They should also expect that we do that each and every time, even though that's not possible. Our staff members risk their lives every day so we may meet our mission. I'm proud to report that we can compete with any correctional agency in this nation. Most citizens would believe a correctional agency is comprised of prisons and correctional officers. We at the Department of Corrections are an agency of 5 correctional facilities, 3 contracted community corrections center, a therapeutic community, 23 probation and parole offices throughout our state, a small central office consisting of support staff, an investigative and canine unit, as well as interstate compact. As I previously mentioned, our success is outstanding. The mission is accomplished through efforts focused on public safety through rehabilitation with validated programming. My experience has taught me that the only popular prison policy is one who punishes. Unfortunately, that doesn't work, and I believe our numbers show that we're successful. Our department requires educators, treatment, medical providers, maintenance, and a gamut of skilled professionals. We manage more than 7,500 convicted felons in our state that don't want to be managed or supervised. For the past year, our recidivism rate for inmates discharging directly from prison is 9.8%. Those returning under supervision is 39%. Or let me say that in a different fashion. 9 out of 10 inmates discharging directly from our institution and 6 out of 10 completing supervision are not returning to incarceration. We track those numbers for 3 years out upon release. I would also like to acknowledge our ACCs, our correctional institutions located in Cheyenne, Casper, and Sheridan. Our rate for this past year was over 78%. That's exceptional. Committee members, it troubles me to be before you today and ask for funding. We are as efficient and as lean as an agency as we ever been during my tenure. However, I also realize my responsibility is to ensure our citizens of our state that we run safe prisons. Mr. Chairman, I'll proceed with our supplemental budget.
Please.
Thank you.
1 second. Go ahead.
So before you Before you go into that, if, on your narrative, I have a question for you on page 8. The end of that where it looks like current data for in-reach participants have continued to show promise with participants engaging in community treatment after being released. Do you feel like we're on track for the better good now that, I mean, it sounds like we're making progress in those folks who have substance abuse, mental health issues upon release, getting treatment and assessments that they need. So can you just, are we headed the right direction?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, I believe we've been working on it for the past several years. I think I believe I reported out to this committee approximately, the best I can remember, we were over 80-some days out when we did that type of transfer into behavioral mental health and things of that nature. We're now involved with our the Wyoming Health Network. And those electronic records are passed, and I can respond back to the committee in writing. I think we're almost under 9 days from the time we released that they're receiving services. So that type of effort our staff is putting into it. It's collaborative across the state. It's really helped.
Thank you.
I don't think our numbers are just shown by chance. It's because of efforts such as that.
Okay, please
Mr.
proceed.
Chairman, committee members, the Department of Corrections, if you would, on page 12, the Department of Corrections is asking for your consideration for 3 supplemental requests. The total amount of this request is $11,184,392, of which $9,442,708 is a one-time funding ask, and $1,739,684 is an ongoing request, which is presented in your supplemental book, as I mentioned on page 12. The agency is not asking for any additional positions. Mr. Chairman, committee members, if we can begin on page 15 of our supplemental book. That is our priority number 2, which is funding for facility housing in the amount of $9,312,374. In November of 2023, the Department of Corrections relocated inmates to Wyoming County jails and a prison in Mississippi as a result of staff vacancies. The decision was implemented to guarantee our community safety, protecting our public staff and those confined, as well as I did my best to prevent any type of constitutional violations within our facilities. We moved our inmates without requesting any funding. How did we get here? There are several factors which impacted our ability to attract and hire correctional officers, such as wages, applicant pool, law enforcement requirements, and frankly, a very difficult and dangerous job our members must do every day. These concerns are not only isolated in Wyoming. In fact, things are much worse in many correctional agencies across our country. Last December, I sat before you and announced our agency had 133 vacant uniform positions, which necessitated the need for the relocation. The legislative body has been very supportive and the pay adjustments, and internally our leaders are doing an excellent job with workplace environment and staff retention. We're not at the level we need to be in order to adequately staff Wyoming State Penitentiary and the Women's Center. During the interim, we worked very hard to recruit and retain officers, and I may inform you, we now have 77 uniform vacancies as of November 30th. That's a net gain of 56 correctional officers. And when I refer to net gain, I'm referring to more than we had last year, because we do have people that leave employment as well as retire. So we have 56 correctional officers due to the hard work we committed last year. Committee members, what does this mean operationally? The Wyoming Conservation Camp in Newcastle, the Wyoming Honor Farm in Riverton, the Wyoming Medium Correctional Institution in Torrington are 95 to 100% filled with our correctional staff. And they're also at 100%, almost at 100% capacity with inmates. The Wyoming State Penitentiary located in Rawlins has seen a net gain. We've gained 18 officers in Rawlins. The Women's Center has only gained 5 officers since the last year. During the calendar year of 2024, 5 training academy classes were conducted and additional graduation classes scheduled for April of 25. After factoring net gains and losses, the DOC, I believe, has made excellent progress. Excluding the opening of WMCI in 2010, this is the first year I can recall in my tenure that we've actually made progress and gained on correctional officers. I'd also want to inform you we returned 60 inmates from out of state back to our facilities first part of November. Committee members, what will get us over the finish line? More officers are needed at our penitentiary and women's center in order to return all of our inmates. We currently are not housing out any females. Last year, I informed the committee that we needed 44 additional officers at our penitentiary and return our inmates. The mission has remained the same with 26 at WSP, and we need 8 officers at the women's center. In order to...
Let me slow you down a little bit.
Certainly.
So last year you had 133 vacancies, right?
Last year we had, yes, 133.
How many vacancies do you have now?
76.
70?
No. Mr. Chairman, let me check my record here real quick. I apologize, sir. Last year, right now, we have 77 vacancies.
And of those 77, how many of those are at the Women's Center and Rollins?
Yes, sir. It's a 25% vacancy at WSP and 37% at the Women's Center, but the actual number of vacancies, if you bear with me, sir, I have it here with me. At Wyoming State Penitentiary, we have 46 vacant correctional officers positions. At the Wyoming Women's Center, we have 16.
And so then if you just kind of fill it in, assuming that you had full employment or close to it, so you had another 40 folks in Rollins, how would that assist in the operations of not having to go out of state as much? I mean, what population shift would we see?
Sure. Mr. Chairman, if I may answer the question this way. Historically, Wyoming has shipped inmates out for various reasons, as you're aware. If we had 28 more officers at Wyoming State Penitentiary, we would have no need to have any inmates out of state. So the other option is to bring our inmates home and then supplement them like we did with our other institutions and run an enormous amount of overtime. So we would need, to answer your question, we would need 28 officers at WSP. That would solve it. And we've made good progress this time.
Yeah, that's my next question is, are we trending in that direction? I mean, for the last few years, we keep telling you to tell us what you need, and if you need, we'll raise the pay raises what we do, and because ultimately we save money if we have our prisoners at home.
Yes, sir. And it also reflects our success rate. And to answer your question, I didn't accept funding, but you did authorize the pay raise, and we're 56 officers more than I spoke to you last year as a net gain. And you're going to lose a few officers a month as to leave and retire. So we have 56 more than, and as I mentioned earlier in my statement, I've been here almost 20 years. We always were going downhill, excluding when we opened MCI. We always had less officers each year. So I think we've done some really positive turnarounds.
Okay, yeah, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, on page, I guess it's 15, there, you're talking about graduating a class during April 2025. Where do your employees go to class? Is that at the Douglas, or where do they go to class? I'm assuming that's your staff people that you're graduating.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Anderson, thank you. We normally run 4 graduating classes. Our classes are 10 weeks at a time. We normally run 4 per year. We've added an extra one. We've added a 5th class with the optimism that we're going to hire. They initially go to Rollins, and then their past 3 weeks, they graduate out of Douglas at the Law Enforcement Academy.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Shannon, first of all, I think you're doing a great job. Can you correct me with regard to the Honor Farm? It was my understanding that there were employees at the Honor Farm that were being, on a weekly basis, during the day sent to Rollins to man that facility. Give me an update on that.
Yes. Mr. Chairman, Senator Salazar, prior to October of 23, we were sending we run 2 12-hour shifts per day. We were sending 1 officer in the morning and 1 officer in the evening. We have since stopped that, and we have 1 extra person, 1 extra officer at the farm. We have 1 above capacity because we have them on the books waiting for an opening at WSP. So that has been stopped for over a year.
Okay, please
Yeah.
proceed.
Mr. Chairman, committee, in order to reach the goals of additional staffing needed to facilities, the DOC has done a number of things. The agency was extremely grateful for footnote 1 in House Bill 1, Section 80. We are now contracting with a recruiting agency which has a proven record of correctional officers. We also want to acknowledge A&I Human Resource Division. They've done an exceptional job. But we feel we need specific targeting efforts over the next 6 months in engaging in the recruiting campaign, and more especially in Rollins and Lusk. This funding has been very beneficial, and I've made the determination to invest our resources in the retention of our current staff, not by providing raises, but providing opportunities for the future. The recent workforce service has indicated that 28% of our staff will be retirement eligible in the next 5 years. This one-time appropriation has provided us with the opportunity to retain and prepare our future leaders with exceptional skill sets that will benefit for years to come. And I may report, and I'm very proud of the hard work that our managers, supervisors, and leaders have performed. I may report that our staff retention is close to 90% over the past 12 months. There are no additional ongoing costs for these initiatives I just spoke of. A few examples: we're partnering with the Wyoming Law Enforcement Academy. We contracted a recruiting organization. We have executive level training, a 12-month leadership course and mid-level leaders provided by the National Institute of Corrections at no cost, and a train-the-trainer program for our first-line supervisors. In summary, the DOC is requesting this appropriation for out-of-facility housing expenses effective immediately. This request includes transportation expenses to initiate the exit plan upon reaching reasonable staffing levels, which I would anticipate we do in increments as soon as we can. This request is also for not growing state government or increasing officer salary. Once our inmates are returned to our facilities, we would propose immediately reverting any unused funds. Mr. Chairman, I'd stand for questions.
Okay, for questions for the director. So Don, typically, in the last several years, what's been the reversions from corrections?
Mr. Chairman, last year, there were no reversions because they were using, or there may have been a de minimis amount of reversions. 95, 98% of their budget was federal funds using the ARPA. Prior to that, I think they hold the traditional record of being the largest agency with reversions, primarily due to the vacancy savings, which is a cumulative impact. I would certainly defer to more precise numbers, but I would say in the 10 million plus range.
So it's essentially what they're asking for. And the ARPA dollars are dispersed, is that correct?
Mr. Chairman,
Go
that's
ahead.
correct. What's taking place is the success of getting the officers in Wyoming doesn't allow us to have the vacancy savings that we would have paid for that with. So this is a one-time catch-up.
Okay, please, Senator.
Did I understand you to say that the reversions were ARPA funds?
Mr. Chairman, a little bit of history. We have two classes of ARPA. ARPA Direct, which has pretty tight restraints on how you can use that, which we just completed the overall reversion of ARPA Direct, $76 million. Then you had ARPA Revenue Replacement, but you still had to spend that money on ARPA qualified related issues. So what we did, meaning the governor's office recommendation, legislature appropriation, was we used the Department of Health and Department of Corrections to use that ARPA revenue replacement. So it came in, it was federally funded last biennium with ARPA, and now it's back to general funds. So we just used them as an instrument and to deliver that. So thank you, Department of Corrections, for going through that process with us to deliver upon that distribution of ARPA dollars.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if it pleases the committee, I would ask that we turn to page 20 in our supplemental budget, which is the DOC's priority number 3, therapeutic community treatment bed, in the amount of $454,874. Committee members, the DOC currently contracts a 100-bed therapeutic community treatment facility in Casper. This unit has consistently remained at capacity, and the daily per diem rate has not kept pace with the overall increase in cost. We have not adjusted the daily per diem rate in the past 14 years. The increase requested from our department was from $67 to $76 per day per inmate. This is a cost avoidance which assists in housing inmates within our facilities. We also provide the therapeutic community services within our institutions because many inmates need to address their addictions. This therapeutic community is a medium custody level facility and takes the pressure off of WMCI in Torrington, which is in excess of 100% inmate capacity. The reason, and it may seem odd, the reason we're presenting at this time was a direct result. The agency didn't receive the inquiry until after BYF 2025 budget requests had been concluded. So that's why, and it wasn't even normal. We're requesting a one-time funding in the amount of $130,334 to make the increase effective April 1st, and continual funding in the amount of $324,540 to maintain the available 100-bed to Casper reentry. In the event that you choose not to fund this, I would renegotiate with them and we would minimize the bids is what it would take place. So that's,
To reduce bids.
yeah, that's the other option, so.
Okay, any questions on that? Please proceed.
Mr. Chairman, committee
One
members.
second. Go ahead, Kevin.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to beg the director's permission to interject on page 23. The governor's recommendation last year should have asked to biennialize this request. It did not, so LSO did not do that. This is on the State Budget Department. We just respectfully ask you to do the house cleaning on this for us. Thank you.
Okay, everyone understand that? Don? Why don't you explain to our folks coming in exactly what this means?
So the governor's budget recommendations in bold at the end of each unit, and this started about 2 biennia ago. He is specifically indicating what is one time, what is ongoing, and what needs to be doubled or biennialized in our lingo. And once those are agreed to, if they are agreed to, Section 311 of each budget bill indicates that the legislature concurs unless otherwise stated in the bill. The otherwise stated would appear in a footnote. For example, if the legislature wanted a specific appropriation to be one time, even though the governor had requested it to be ongoing, you could say so and overrule the governor's recommendation and his intentions. In this case, the request was to biennialize the funds, meaning double them for the 25-26 biennium. And when they were incorporated into the budget, they were put in at 1/2 the amount, or 1 year of the 2 bienniums, meaning they were not doubled or multiplied by 2. So had everyone followed the law in the 23-24 budget, it would have allowed the Department of Corrections to include this automatically within their standard budget.
Okay, any questions on that? All right, please proceed.
Mr. Chairman, I'll stand for questions with the committee. Any questions the committee may have?
Okay, stand. Any other questions for the director? Going once, going twice? All right.
We certainly want to thank you for having us and wish you all a Merry Christmas.
And for the new members coming in, when the Director Shannon took over, he reorganized and kind of reconstituted corrections, saving us millions and millions of dollars. And so he's been kind of our favorite director now for several years running because of the way that he's actually managed and operated his directorship, and so we appreciate your work very much.
Thank you.
I thought it was just because he's a good guy. I thought it's just because he's a good guy.
Yeah, that too.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
So Don, looks like we're done for the morning hour. Why don't you talk about the rest of the day for us before we break?
Mr. Chairman, I believe the only item you have left on the agenda are 7 bills, and keep in mind, one of those was posted recently. So you have 7 bills on the topic of gaming, and I'm doing this largely for the public and any interested parties on those bills. I presume that you will start those immediately upon lunch, after lunch, excuse me. In addition, we do have a oddity in the building that we've just become aware of, and they will be testing the visual as well as auditory fire alarms. And the chairman have agreed to that, allowing it to commence at 5:30 p.m. So we do kind of have a hard deadline because it will not be a reasonable work environment after that.
So we've got a few minutes. Don, why don't you give us a background on the gaming committee of JAC and what they did?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I was trying to get a little bit of history. I suspect you don't want to go this far back.
Tamara's online.
Oh.
We can have Tamara there.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I don't think I can run up there in time to catch you before lunch, but I am talking to you from the floor below.
Yeah, go ahead, Tamara.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So Dawn, please continue if you'd like, or I can provide an update on the working group and where this topic has come from.
Please proceed.
Thank you. So the JAC has been working on gaming all interim. They've considered policy topics, research products, and heard testimony at every single one of its meetings. They have been working bills at all of their meetings other than the first meeting. And at the most recent meeting, at the end of October, beginning of November, the JAC did pass one bill to consolidate all of the gaming statutes into one green book, into one section, so that you will see introduced. The committee decided not to take up the other bills that were on their agenda and instead sent them back to the working group. And so that working group met and they invited testimony from local governments, from the County Commissioners Association and the Wyoming Association of Municipalities, as well as the Wyoming Gaming Commission, to work through some of their bills. And the biggest bill that was changed was the local approval. That's numbered 25 LSO 0051. That bill contained the most changes, but there were a few other tweaks, a technical correction and a change to an appropriation and other bills. That committee also had asked, or the working group had asked, that 0219, which would impose limits on historic horse racing devices. There was an amendment in process to that bill draft, and they had it made into a bill draft. And that bill draft is 0533. That's the new bill draft that has appeared on your agenda. And so the committee consider both options, or they can take one or the other. It's up to them. So any other questions on background?
So no, I think that's fine. We'll address it again when we get together at 1 and kind of break out why these committees, why there was a working group, why Appropriations took on this task, because essentially we were directed by Management Council to do it, because there is no home committee really for the Gaming Commission other than this committee. And so you new members will become the home committee for the Gaming Commission as time goes forward. So with that, Mr. Co-Chair, anything else for the morning?
Nothing.
All right, we'll stand in recess until 1 p.m.